Deep beneath the emerald canopy of a Guatemalan rainforest, laser beams pierce through centuries of silence, revealing secrets that no human eye has seen for over 1,000 years. The revolutionary LiDAR technology scanning from aircraft above has just uncovered something extraordinary. An ancient Maya city called Valeriana, home to perhaps 50,000 souls, larger than many modern capitals, yet completely hidden beneath the jungle floor until 2024. This is not the exception. This is the rule. Across our planet, beneath desert sands and jungle growth, under layers of volcanic ash and centuries of accumulated earth, lie the remnants of civilizations that once dominated their worlds. These were not primitive societies scratching out a meager existence. They were sophisticated cultures that built monuments rivaling our greatest achievements, developed technologies we struggle to replicate, and created art that still moves us to wonder. Yet they vanished. Some disappeared so completely that we have only recently rediscovered them. Others left behind mysteries so profound that despite decades of study, we still cannot explain how they accomplished what they did, let alone why they abandoned it all. The Indus Valley Civilization, which flourished across an area larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, left behind cities with drainage systems superior to many modern municipalities. Yet we cannot read a single word of their script. The Maya developed mathematical concepts including zero independently of the Old World, tracked celestial movements with stunning precision, and built pyramids that stand among humanity's greatest architectural achievements, then walked away from their cities, leaving them to be swallowed by the jungle. What makes these disappearances all the more haunting is the scale of what was lost. When archaeologists first began excavating Angkor in Cambodia, they uncovered what they thought was a large temple complex. Advanced LiDAR surveys revealed the stunning truth. This was the world's largest pre-industrial urban area, a sprawling metropolis covering over 1,000 square kilometers, home to perhaps 1 million people. For comparison, London in 1800 CE housed fewer than 1 million inhabitants. Yet this massive civilization, with its intricate hydraulic systems and monumental architecture, was gradually abandoned and reclaimed by the jungle. The mystery deepens when we consider the sophistication these civilizations achieved. The Minoan culture of ancient Crete created Europe's first great palaces, complete with indoor plumbing, multi-story buildings, and artistic traditions that influenced cultures across the Mediterranean. They were master traders whose ships carried goods from Britain to the shores of Africa. Their capital at Knossos was a marvel of Bronze Age engineering, with storage areas capable of feeding thousands, workshops producing luxury goods, and ceremonial spaces that inspired the Greek legends of the Labyrinth and the Minotaur. Then, around 1450 BCE, it all came to an end. The Mycenaean Greeks, whose exploits may have inspired Homer's tales of Troy, controlled trade networks stretching from the Black Sea to North Africa. Their palace archives, preserved on clay tablets and successfully deciphered in 1952, reveal a complex bureaucratic society that tracked everything from livestock to perfume ingredients with meticulous precision. These were the people who may have fought the legendary Trojan War, who built the massive fortifications at places like Tiryns with stone blocks so large that later Greeks believed only the mythical Cyclops could have moved them. Yet by 1100 BCE, their palaces lay in ruins, their writing system was forgotten, and much of Greece had entered what scholars call a dark age that would last for centuries. What force could bring down such advanced civilizations? Climate change played a devastating role in many cases. The Indus Valley Civilization faced a centuries-long drought that began around 1200 BCE, forcing the abandonment of cities that had thrived for over 1,000 years. The Maya Classic Period collapse coincided with what researchers call the Great Drought of 800–1050 CE, during which precipitation in some areas dropped by up to 70%. Tree ring data and lake sediment cores reveal that this was not just any drought. It was one of the most severe climate disasters of the past 7,000 years. But climate alone cannot explain every disappearance. The Mycenaean collapse appears linked to a series of mysterious earthquake storms that struck the eastern Mediterranean between 1225 and 1175 BCE, destroying multiple cities within a span of decades. Archaeological evidence shows layers of destruction followed by hasty rebuilding, then more destruction, suggesting these weren't random natural disasters but part of a pattern of catastrophic seismic activity that overwhelmed even the most sophisticated Bronze Age societies. Sometimes, the vanishings were more gradual but no less mysterious. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, has long been held up as the ultimate cautionary tale of ecological collapse, with its famous Moai statues standing as silent witnesses to a civilization that supposedly destroyed itself through environmental mismanagement. Recent research has turned this narrative upside down. The island's population appears to have remained stable at 3,000 to 4,000 people right up until European contact. And the dramatic deforestation was likely caused not by human activity, but by Polynesian rats that ate the seeds of native palm trees, preventing forest regeneration. This revelation illustrates one of the most fascinating aspects of studying vanished civilizations. Our understanding is constantly evolving. Technologies that didn't exist a generation ago are revolutionizing archaeology and overturning long-held assumptions. Ground-penetrating radar reveals hidden structures without excavation. DNA analysis of ancient remains tells us about diet, disease, and population movements with unprecedented precision. Satellite imagery and artificial intelligence can identify archaeological sites with 80% accuracy, leading to discoveries that would have taken decades using traditional methods. Perhaps nowhere is this technological revolution more evident than in the jungle cities of the Maya. For over a century, archaeologists struggled through dense vegetation, mapping temples and palaces one painstaking structure at a time. LiDAR has revealed that Maya cities were typically 4 times larger than previously estimated, with sophisticated road networks, agricultural terraces, and defensive structures extending far beyond the ceremonial centers that had captured earlier attention. The discovery of Valeriana in 2024, with its estimated 30,000 to 50,000 inhabitants, came not from years of jungle exploration but from a PhD student analyzing publicly available LiDAR data on his laptop. Yet for all our technological advances, fundamental mysteries remain. The Olmec civilization of ancient Mexico created some of the most distinctive art in the prehistoric Americas, massive basalt heads weighing up to 40 tons, each carved with individual features so distinct they appear to be portraits of specific rulers. These colossal sculptures were created without metal tools, moved across difficult terrain without wheels or large domesticated animals, and positioned at ceremonial sites with careful attention to astronomical alignments. The Olmec developed sophisticated concepts of zero and place notation in mathematics, created what may be the earliest writing system in the Americas, and established artistic and religious traditions that would influence Mesoamerican cultures for thousands of years. Then, around 400 BCE, their distinctive culture simply faded away, leaving behind their massive stone heads as silent witnesses to achievements we still struggle to fully comprehend. The pattern repeats across continents and millennia. In the high Andes of Bolivia, the Tiwanaku civilization created architectural marvels at an altitude of 12,600 feet, where the thin air makes even walking difficult for modern visitors. Their megalithic structures at Pumapunku feature stone blocks fitted together with such precision that archaeologists struggle to understand how they achieved such accuracy without modern tools. Some blocks weigh over 100 tons and were somehow transported across the Altiplano from quarries miles away. The Tiwanaku developed sophisticated agricultural techniques that allowed them to thrive in one of the world's harshest environments, creating raised field systems that increased crop yields in the challenging high-altitude climate. Around 1000 CE, this remarkable civilization collapsed, leaving behind monuments that local legend attributes to the gods themselves. In North America, the story of Cahokia illustrates how dramatically our understanding of the continent's pre-Columbian past continues to evolve. Until recently, many Americans believed that complex urban civilizations were absent from North America before European arrival. The reality is far different. Cahokia, located near present-day St. Louis, was a thriving metropolis that at its peak around 1100 CE housed up to 40,000 people, larger than contemporary London or Paris. The city featured a massive central plaza, enormous earthen pyramids, and residential neighborhoods that extended for miles. Its influence spread across much of eastern North America through trade networks that brought copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, and exotic materials from as far away as the Rocky Mountains. Around 1400 CE, this remarkable urban center was abandoned, leaving behind only the mysterious earthen mounds that European settlers would later encounter and struggle to explain. What makes these disappearances particularly intriguing is not just their scale, but their diversity. Some civilizations seem to have collapsed suddenly. The Mycenaean palaces show evidence of violent destruction, with precious objects left scattered on floors as if their owners fled in haste. Others declined gradually over generations, like Angkor, where recent research suggests the abandonment process took over a century rather than happening all at once. Still others appear to have transformed rather than truly vanished. The classic Maya collapse was followed by a post-classic period with different political structures and settlement patterns, while the descendants of the ancestral Puebloans, formerly called Anasazi, became the modern Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest. This diversity suggests that there is no single explanation for why civilizations disappear. Each case involves a unique combination of environmental pressures, social dynamics, political instability, and external threats. What they share is the human capacity for both remarkable achievement and apparent fragility in the face of change. The study of vanished civilizations has taken on new urgency in our modern era of rapid environmental change and global interconnection. Many of the stresses that contributed to ancient collapses, climate change, resource depletion, social inequality, political instability, are challenges we face today. The sophisticated water management systems that allowed Angkor to thrive, and whose failure may have contributed to its decline, offer lessons for modern cities facing water scarcity. The Maya response to drought conditions provides insights into both successful adaptation strategies and the limits of environmental resilience. As we stand at the beginning of the 21st century, equipped with technologies that would seem magical to ancient peoples yet facing environmental and social challenges that echo those of the past, these vanished civilizations speak to us across the centuries. They remind us that human achievement, no matter how impressive, is never permanent. They warn us that even sophisticated societies can disappear, leaving only ruins and mysteries for future generations to ponder. But they also inspire us. Every rediscovered city, every deciphered script, every technological achievement reconstructed through archaeological detective work demonstrates human creativity, adaptability, and the endless capacity to build something beautiful and meaningful, even knowing that nothing lasts forever. The stories of these vanished civilizations are ultimately stories about us, about what we can achieve, what we can lose, and what we can learn from both triumph and collapse. As new discoveries continue to emerge from beneath jungle canopy and desert sand, as DNA reveals ancient migrations and AI deciphers forgotten scripts, we are reminded that the past is not a closed book, but an ongoing conversation between ancient peoples and modern investigators, each discovery adding new chapters to the endless human story of creation, loss, and rediscovery. To this day, no one has been able to fully explain why so many sophisticated civilizations chose to abandon their greatest achievements. Yet perhaps that is part of their enduring fascination. In a world where we often assume progress is linear and civilization is permanent, these mysterious disappearances remind us that human history is far more complex, surprising, and ultimately mysterious than we might imagine. What secrets still lie buried beneath our feet? What civilizations have we yet to discover? And what can they teach us about the eternal human challenge of building something lasting in an ever-changing world? 1. The Bronze Age catastrophe. The mysteries become even more haunting when we realize that some of history's greatest disappearances happened not in isolation, but as part of a catastrophic cascade that swept across the ancient world like a plague of forgetting. Around 1200 BCE, within the span of a few generations, multiple sophisticated civilizations that had flourished for centuries simply ended. Archaeologists call it the Late Bronze Age collapse, but this clinical term barely captures the magnitude of what occurred. Imagine if New York, London, Tokyo, and Paris were all simultaneously abandoned within 50 years. Their inhabitants scattered to the winds, their technologies forgotten, their great libraries reduced to ash. This is what happened to the Bronze Age world, and we are still struggling to understand why. The Indus Valley Civilization, cities without kings. The story begins in the vast river valleys of what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, where one of humanity's most remarkable and mysterious civilizations flourished for over 1,000 years before vanishing so completely that it was forgotten by history itself. The Harappan civilization, as archaeologists call it, covered an area larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, over 2 million square kilometers of sophisticated urban planning that would not be matched again until the Roman Empire. When British archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler first excavated Harappa in the 1920s, he discovered something that challenged every assumption about early civilization. Here were cities laid out with geometric precision, streets running in perfect grids, sophisticated drainage systems with covered sewers, and standardized weights and measures that remained consistent across thousands of kilometers. The largest city, Mohenjo-Daro, housed an estimated 40,000 people in multi-story buildings with indoor plumbing, private wells, and waste management systems superior to those found in many parts of the world today. Yet the more archaeologists uncovered, the more mysterious these people became. Every other major ancient civilization left behind monuments to kings and gods, palaces and temples that proclaimed the power of rulers and the majesty of deities. The Harappans built no pyramids, erected no colossal statues, constructed no obvious palaces. Their cities show a remarkable equality of housing. Even the largest residences differ only modestly from smaller ones. Recent analysis by researcher Dr. Jonathan Mark Kenoyer suggests this was perhaps history's most egalitarian complex society, a civilization that somehow organized millions of people without the rigid hierarchies that characterized other ancient cultures. The mystery deepens when we examine their undeciphered script. Over 4,000 inscriptions have been found, containing more than 400 distinct symbols. Yet despite a century of effort by linguists and computer scientists, no one has been able to read a single sentence. The symbols appear on seals, pottery, and bronze tablets, suggesting a sophisticated system of record-keeping and communication, but their meaning remains locked away. In 2022, researchers using artificial intelligence to analyze the patterns reported that the script shows characteristics of a true writing system rather than simple pictographs, making the inability to decipher it all the more frustrating. The Harappans were master craftsmen and international traders. Their beautifully carved seals have been found in Mesopotamian cities, evidence of trade networks that stretched from the Himalayas to the Persian Gulf. They produced intricate jewelry, perfectly balanced scales, and standardized bronze tools using sophisticated metallurgical techniques. Their dock at Lat Hal featured the world's first known tide locks, allowing ships to safely enter and exit regardless of tidal conditions. An engineering innovation that wouldn't be reinvented until the 13th century CE in Europe. Around 1900 BCE, something went catastrophically wrong. The great cities were gradually abandoned, their sophisticated drainage systems fell into disrepair, and the distinctive Harappan pottery and seals vanished from the archaeological record. Recent research has revealed the likely culprit: climate change on a devastating scale. Dr. Yama Dixit's groundbreaking research using oxygen isotope analysis of ancient shells has documented a dramatic weakening of the monsoon system beginning around 1200 BCE. The life-giving rains that had sustained Harappan agriculture for over a millennium decreased by up to 30%, turning fertile farmland into parched earth. The abandonment wasn't sudden or violent. There are no signs of warfare or destruction. Instead, it appears to have been a gradual retreat as communities moved eastward toward more reliable water sources along the Ganges River system. The last remnants of Harappan culture lingered until about 1300 BCE before disappearing entirely, taking with them the secrets of their script, their remarkable urban planning, and their egalitarian social organization. The Minoan Empire, Europe's first great civilization. While the Harappan cities were slowly emptying in the east, another magnificent civilization was reaching its zenith on the island of Crete. The Minoans, named after the legendary King Minos by archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, created Europe's first great palaces and established the continent's earliest known writing system. Their civilization would inspire Greek myths that echo through the ages, from the labyrinth of the Minotaur to the legend of Atlantis itself. The Palace of Knossos, the Minoans' greatest achievement, was a marvel of Bronze Age architecture that covered over 20,000 square meters and housed thousands of people. Built without defensive walls, suggesting a remarkably peaceful society. The palace featured innovations that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for over a millennium. Multi-story buildings rose 4 levels high, connected by elaborate staircases and corridors. Sophisticated plumbing systems provided running water and flush toilets. Light wells ingeniously illuminated interior rooms, while ceremonial halls capable of holding hundreds of people hosted religious rituals and state functions. The walls of Knossos came alive with frescoes that still captivate viewers today. Dolphins dancing through blue seas, elegant court ladies with elaborate hairstyles, and most famously, young athletes vaulting over the backs of charging bulls in a ceremony that may have inspired the later Greek myth of the Minotaur. These paintings reveal a culture that celebrated nature, athleticism, and what appears to be gender equality. Women are depicted in positions of authority and participating equally in religious ceremonies and court life. The Minoans developed 2 writing systems, the earlier Cretan hieroglyphs and the more sophisticated Linear A script. Like the Harappan script, Linear A remains tantalizingly undeciphered despite decades of effort. Over 1,400 inscriptions have been found, clearly showing a complex bureaucratic system for managing palace resources and trade networks, but their exact meaning continues to elude scholars. Dr. Gareth Owens of Crete's Technological Educational Institute has spent decades attempting to decode Linear A, suggesting it may represent an unknown Indo-European language, but definitive proof remains elusive. The Minoans were master seafarers whose ships dominated Mediterranean trade for centuries. Their merchants established trading posts from Cyprus to Sicily, exchanging Cretan pottery, textiles, and metalwork for raw materials and exotic goods. Minoan-style frescoes have been discovered as far away as Tel Kabri in Israel and Tel El Dabei in Egypt, evidence of their cultural influence across the ancient world. Around 1450 BCE, this remarkable civilization met its end in circumstances that remain hotly debated. The massive volcanic eruption at Thera, modern Santorini, around 1627 BCE had certainly damaged Minoan cities and disrupted their trade networks, but the civilization survived this catastrophe and rebuilt. The final collapse came 2 centuries later and appears to have involved Mycenaean Greeks from the mainland, who took control of Knossos and other Minoan centers. Recent underwater archaeology has added dramatic new chapters to the Minoan story. In 2024, marine archaeologists discovered a Minoan bronze dagger in a late Bronze Age shipwreck off the Turkish coast, providing new evidence of their far-reaching trade networks. The discovery suggests that Minoan influence extended even further than previously known, with their distinctive metalwork reaching the shores of Anatolia. Mycenaean Greece, the truth behind Troy. The Mycenaeans who conquered the Minoans were themselves heirs to a magnificent civilization that may have provided the historical kernel for the greatest stories ever told. These were possibly the Greeks who besieged Troy, the warriors whose exploits inspired Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and the builders of massive fortifications so impressive that later Greeks believed only mythical giants could have constructed them. Mycenaean civilization emerged around 1650 BCE and reached its peak between 1450 and 1200 BCE. Their massive palaces at Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos controlled vast territories through a complex feudal system that required sophisticated record-keeping. Fortunately for archaeologists, the Mycenaeans adapted Linear A into Linear B, a script successfully deciphered by architect Michael Ventris in 1952, one of the greatest intellectual achievements of the 20th century. The Linear B tablets reveal a civilization of remarkable complexity and bureaucratic sophistication. Palace scribes meticulously recorded everything from livestock inventories to perfume ingredients, from chariot wheel specifications to offerings for religious festivals. We learn of a society ruled by a Wanax, king, supported by a hierarchy of nobles, officials, and specialists. The tablets mention over 100 different occupations, from bronzesmiths and carpenters to perfume makers and chariot fighters. The Mycenaeans were master engineers whose cyclopean walls still inspire awe today. At Tiryns, limestone blocks weighing up to 15 tons were fitted together without mortar to create fortifications over 20 feet thick. The famous Lion Gate at Mycenae, with its heraldic lions carved in stone, served as the entrance to a citadel that controlled one of the richest territories in the Bronze Age Mediterranean. These were also the people who may have launched 1,000 ships against Troy. The Mycenaean world described in the Linear B tablets matches remarkably well with Homer's description of the Greek forces that besieged Troy, a confederation of powerful kingdoms centered on mighty citadels, each ruled by a warrior king with his retinue of nobles and followers. Archaeological evidence from Troy, Hisarlik in modern Turkey, shows destruction layers from the late 13th or early 12th century BCE that could correspond to the legendary war. The Mycenaean collapse was swift and devastating. Between 1200 and 1100 BCE, their great palaces were destroyed, never to be rebuilt. The Linear B writing system was abandoned and forgotten, not to be replaced by alphabetic Greek for another 400 years. Population declined dramatically, and much of Greece entered what archaeologists call the Greek Dark Ages. Recent research has revealed that this collapse was part of a broader pattern of destruction affecting the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Dr. Jesse Crescen's analysis of Bronze Age destruction layers has identified a series of earthquake storms, clusters of major seismic events, that struck the region between 1225 and 1175 BCE. Cities from Greece to Turkey to the Levant show evidence of earthquake damage followed by hasty rebuilding, then more destruction, suggesting a cascade of natural disasters that overwhelmed even the most sophisticated Bronze Age societies. The Sea Peoples, mysterious destroyers of worlds. Into this world weakened by earthquakes and climate change came one of history's most enigmatic forces: the Sea Peoples. Egyptian records describe them as raiders and invaders who swept across the eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BCE, destroying cities and toppling kingdoms in their wake. Yet despite being mentioned in numerous ancient sources, their origins remain one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses III left detailed accounts of his battles against the Sea Peoples around 1180 BCE, describing them as coming from islands in the midst of the sea, and arriving in great fleets accompanied by ox carts carrying their families and possessions. The temple reliefs at Medinet Habu show feathered helmeted warriors fighting Egyptian forces in both naval and land battles, while hieroglyphic texts list their various tribes: the Shurden, Lukka, Tersha, Shikalesh, and the mysterious Peleset, who may have given their name to Palestine. Who were these seaborne destroyers? Theories abound, but proof remains elusive. Some scholars argue they were displaced Mycenaean Greeks fleeing the collapse of their own civilization. Others suggest they originated in the Western Mediterranean, perhaps Sicily or Sardinia, or even that they came from the Black Sea region. Recent DNA analysis of Bronze Age remains has added tantalizing clues but no definitive answers. What makes the Sea Peoples particularly mysterious is the thoroughness of the destruction they left behind. The great trading city of Ugarit in Syria was so completely destroyed that it was never rebuilt. The Hittite Empire, which had controlled much of Anatolia for centuries, simply vanished from history. Cities across the Levant show burn layers from this period, followed by either abandonment or occupation by peoples using completely different pottery styles and building techniques. The most recent archaeological research suggests that the Sea Peoples may not have been a single coordinated force but rather multiple groups of displaced populations set in motion by the climate crisis and political instability of the late 13th century BCE. As traditional kingdoms collapsed and trade networks failed, entire populations may have been forced to seek new homes, creating a domino effect of migration and conflict that swept across the Eastern Mediterranean. The Bronze Age collapse represents one of history's most dramatic examples of systemic failure. Within the span of about 50 years, the sophisticated palace civilizations that had dominated the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries were swept away. Writing systems were forgotten, international trade networks collapsed, and populations declined dramatically. It would take centuries for the region to recover, and when new civilizations emerged, they bore little resemblance to their Bronze Age predecessors. Yet from these ashes would eventually rise classical Greece, the Roman Empire, and the other civilizations that would shape our modern world. The Bronze Age collapse reminds us that even the most catastrophic endings can become new beginnings, and that human resilience often shines brightest in humanity's darkest hours. To this day, the exact mechanisms of this civilizational catastrophe remain hotly debated. Was it climate change that set the collapse in motion? Earthquake storms that shattered the physical foundations of Bronze Age society? Economic disruption that made complex palace systems unsustainable? Or was it the mysterious sea peoples who delivered the final blow to already weakened civilizations? The truth likely involves all these factors working together in a cascade of destruction that overwhelmed even the most sophisticated societies of the Bronze Age world. Their story serves as a powerful reminder that civilization, no matter how advanced, is always more fragile than it appears. 2. The American enigmas. While the Bronze Age world was crumbling in catastrophic collapse, on the far side of the globe, separated by vast oceans and millennia of independent development, other magnificent civilizations were rising, flourishing, and facing their own mysterious disappearances. The Americas harbored secrets that would remain hidden from the rest of the world until European explorers stumbled upon ruins so magnificent they could scarcely believe what they were seeing. These were not the primitive societies that colonial narratives would later claim. These were civilizations that independently invented writing, developed mathematical concepts including zero, tracked celestial movements with stunning precision, and created architectural marvels that still challenge our understanding today. Yet, like their old world counterparts, many of these remarkable cultures would face mysterious ends that continue to baffle archaeologists and captivate the imagination. The Maya collapse, when cities died in the jungle. Deep in the rainforests of Guatemala, an eerie silence hangs over the stepped pyramids of Tikal. These magnificent structures, some rising over 200 feet above the jungle floor, once echoed with the voices of perhaps 100,000 people who called this sprawling metropolis home. Today, howler monkeys patrol the empty plazas where Maya kings once held court, and cecropia trees grow from the rooftops of palaces that housed the most sophisticated civilization of the ancient Americas. Tikal is just one of dozens of Maya cities that suffered the same fate. Between 800 and 950 CE, in what archaeologists call the classic Maya collapse, the greatest urban civilization of the pre-Columbian Americas simply walked away from their cities and never returned. The scale of this abandonment was staggering. Recent LiDAR surveys have revealed that Maya cities were typically 4 times larger than previously estimated, with elaborate road networks, agricultural terraces, and defensive structures extending far beyond the ceremonial centers that had captured earlier archaeological attention. The Maya had every reason to stay. Their civilization had flourished for over 1,000 years, reaching heights of achievement that wouldn't be matched in the Americas again until the rise of the Aztec and Inca empires. They developed the most sophisticated writing system in the pre-Columbian Americas, with over 800 hieroglyphic signs capable of expressing complex ideas, historical narratives, and astronomical calculations. Their scribes recorded dynastic histories spanning centuries, tracked the movements of Venus with stunning accuracy, and calculated dates millions of years into the future. Maya architects created some of humanity's most beautiful buildings without metal tools, wheels, or large domesticated animals. The Pyramid Temple of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza was designed so that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the play of light and shadow creates the illusion of a serpent descending the staircase, a feat of astronomical and architectural precision that still amazes visitors today. At Palenque, the Temple of Inscriptions houses the elaborate tomb of Kinich Jenab Pakal, whose reign of 68 years was meticulously recorded in hieroglyphic texts that researchers are still deciphering. Their mathematical achievements were equally impressive. The Maya developed the concept of zero independently of the Old World, created a sophisticated place notation system that allowed them to perform complex calculations, and devised multiple interlocking calendar systems that tracked time with extraordinary precision. They could predict solar eclipses centuries in advance and calculated the length of the solar year as 365,242 days, remarkably close to our modern measurement of 365,256 days. Yet, despite these achievements, something went catastrophically wrong during the 9th century CE. The great cities that had dominated Maya civilization for centuries were gradually abandoned. At Copan in Honduras, the last known monument was erected in 822 CE. At Tikal, the final dated inscription was carved in 869 CE. One by one, the great Maya centers fell silent, their populations dispersing into the jungle or migrating north to the Yucatan Peninsula, where Maya civilization would continue in a different form. Recent scientific detective work has revealed the likely culprit behind this collapse: one of the most severe droughts in the past 7,000 years. Dr. David Hoddle's groundbreaking research using sediment cores from Lake Xixancanab in Mexico has documented a devastating drought that lasted from approximately 800 to 1050 CE. During the worst periods, precipitation decreased by up to 70%, turning the life-giving rains that sustained Maya agriculture into sporadic, unreliable showers. The drought's impact was amplified by the Mayas' own success. At their peak, Maya cities supported population densities that pushed the limits of what tropical agriculture could sustain. They had cleared vast areas of forest for farmland, built elaborate reservoir systems to capture rainwater, and developed intensive agricultural techniques including raised fields and terraced hillsides. When the rains failed, these innovations weren't enough to prevent catastrophe. But the Maya collapse wasn't simply a story of environmental determinism. Recent discoveries have revealed a more complex picture of political instability, warfare, and social breakdown that accompanied the environmental crisis. Maya inscriptions from the late Classic period record increasing warfare between city-states, suggesting that as resources became scarce, competition intensified. Some Maya centers show evidence of violent destruction, while others appear to have been abandoned more gradually as populations drifted away. The 2024 discovery of Valeriana, a massive Maya city hidden beneath the jungle canopy of Campeche, Mexico, has added new dimensions to our understanding of the collapse. This city, which may have housed 30,000 to 50,000 people at its peak, shows evidence of sophisticated water management systems and agricultural innovations that allowed it to thrive even in challenging environmental conditions. Yet even Valeriana was eventually abandoned, its sophisticated infrastructure left to be reclaimed by the jungle. What makes the Maya collapse particularly poignant is that it wasn't complete. Maya civilization continued in the northern Yucatan, where cities like Chichen Itza and Mayapan flourished during the post-Classic period. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they encountered millions of Maya people living in dozens of independent kingdoms. The descendants of the classic Maya builders still live throughout Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, maintaining aspects of their ancestral culture, including languages that are direct descendants of the speech of the pyramid builders. The Olmec mystery, colossal heads and vanished masters. Long before the Maya built their first pyramids, another mysterious civilization dominated the tropical lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast. The Olmec, who flourished from approximately 1200 to 400 BCE, created some of the most distinctive and enigmatic art in the ancient Americas, massive basalt heads that seem to gaze across the centuries with an eternal, inscrutable expression. These colossal heads, 17 of which have been discovered at Olmec sites, are among the most remarkable sculptures created by any ancient civilization. The largest weighs approximately 40 tons and stands nearly 10 feet tall. Each head appears to represent a specific individual, with distinct facial features, headdresses, and expressions that suggest they were portraits of Olmec rulers. Yet creating and moving these monuments required organizational capabilities and technological sophistication that challenge our understanding of what was possible in prehistoric Mesoamerica. The basalt for these sculptures came from quarries in the Tuxtla Mountains, up to 100 kilometers from the sites where the heads were eventually placed. Moving 40-ton blocks of stone across this distance, through swamps and rivers, without wheels or large domesticated animals, represents one of the most impressive logistical achievements of the ancient world. Recent experimental archaeology has suggested that the Olmec may have used wooden rollers and rope systems to transport these massive blocks, but the exact methods remain mysterious. The Olmec established the first complex society in Mesoamerica, creating urban centers that would influence all subsequent civilizations in the region. Their capital at La Venta, built on an island in the coastal swamps of Tabasco, featured the first pyramid in the Americas, a massive earthen mound over 100 feet tall that served as the ceremonial heart of their civilization. The city was laid out according to a precise north-south axis and included elaborate courtyards, ceremonial platforms, and residential areas that housed thousands of people. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Olmec were master traders whose influence extended across Mesoamerica. Olmec-style jade objects have been found as far away as Costa Rica, while obsidian from central Mexico and iron ore from Oaxaca have been discovered at Olmec sites. evidence of trade networks that span the entire region. They appear to have established the artistic and religious traditions that would later be adopted by the Maya, Zapotec, and other Mesoamerican civilizations. Perhaps most intriguingly, the Olmec may have developed the earliest writing system in the Americas. The Cascajal block, discovered in 1999, features 62 distinct symbols arranged in horizontal rows that appear to represent a true writing system rather than simple pictographs. Dated to approximately 900 BCE, this inscription predates known Maya writing by several centuries and suggests that the Olmec were not only master sculptors and traders, but also pioneers in the development of literacy in the Americas. Yet, for all their achievements, the Olmec remain enigmatic. Unlike later Mesoamerican civilizations that left behind extensive written records, the Olmec speak to us primarily through their art and architecture. Their religious beliefs, political organization, and social structure must be inferred from archaeological evidence rather than read in their own words. Around 400 BCE, the distinctive Olmec culture began to fade. Their great centers were gradually abandoned, and their artistic traditions were absorbed into the cultures of their successors. What caused this decline remains a mystery. Some scholars suggest environmental changes may have made their coastal homeland less hospitable, while others point to political instability or competition from emerging highland civilizations. Most mysteriously, many Olmec monuments show evidence of deliberate destruction. At San Lorenzo, massive basalt heads and other sculptures were systematically mutilated and buried around 900 BCE, suggesting some kind of violent political revolution or ritual destruction. The heads were carefully interred in precise arrangements, implying that their burial was a deliberate, perhaps ceremonial act rather than simple vandalism. The Anasazi abandonment, empty cities in the cliffs. In the high desert of the American Southwest, the sandstone cliffs of Mesa Verde conceal one of North America's most dramatic archaeological mysteries. Here, carved into seemingly impossible cliff faces, are the elaborate stone dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans, a people formerly known as the Anasazi who created a sophisticated civilization in one of the continent's most challenging environments. The most famous of these cliff dwellings, Cliff Palace, is an architectural marvel that housed over 100 people in 150 rooms connected by a maze of passages, courtyards, and ceremonial chambers. Built around 1200 CE without metal tools, mortar, or sophisticated lifting equipment, these structures required remarkable engineering skill and intimate knowledge of the cliff face's geological structure. The builders had to haul every stone, timber, and jar of water up the cliff face. Yet they created multi-story buildings with sophisticated ventilation systems, storage chambers, and ceremonial spaces. The ancestral Puebloans had inhabited the Mesa Verde region for over 700 years, developing from a nomadic hunting and gathering society into sophisticated farmers and builders. They mastered the art of dryland farming in an environment that receives less than 18 inches of rainfall per year, creating elaborate irrigation systems and terraced gardens that maximized every drop of precious water. They developed distinctive pottery traditions, created intricate baskets that could hold water, and built extensive road networks that connected their communities across hundreds of miles of rugged terrain. Their astronomical knowledge was sophisticated and practical. At Chimney Rock, a pair of distinctive stone spires served as a natural observatory where ancestral Puebloan astronomers tracked the 186-year lunar cycle with remarkable precision. This knowledge helped them determine optimal planting times and coordinate regional ceremonies that brought together communities from across the Southwest. Yet around 1300 CE, after investing enormous effort in building these cliff dwellings, the ancestral Puebloans simply walked away. The abandonment was so complete that Spanish explorers in the 16th century found the cliff dwellings empty, their household possessions left behind as if the inhabitants had just stepped out for a brief journey and never returned. Pottery vessels still sat on floors, grinding stones remained in position for processing corn, and even sandals were found neatly stored in wall niches. For over a century, archaeologists debated the cause of this abandonment. Early theories blamed warfare, disease, or environmental degradation, but recent research has revealed a more complex and ultimately more troubling explanation. The Great Drought of 1276 to 1299 CE, one of the most severe climatic events in the Southwest's recorded history. Tree ring data analyzed by Dr. Scott Stein and others has documented this drought with extraordinary precision. For 23 consecutive years, precipitation in the Southwest fell to levels far below anything experienced in modern times. Spring snowpack, crucial for recharging groundwater and filling streams, virtually disappeared in some years. The elaborate water management systems that had sustained ancestral Puebloan communities for centuries simply couldn't cope with such extreme conditions. But the drought alone doesn't explain the abandonment. Recent DNA analysis of ancient turkey bones has provided fascinating insights into what actually happened to the people of Mesa Verde. Dr. Camilla Speller's groundbreaking 2024 research has traced the genetic lineages of domesticated turkeys from Mesa Verde sites to modern Pueblo communities along the Rio Grande in New Mexico, providing direct evidence that the ancestral Puebloans didn't disappear. They migrated to areas with more reliable water sources. This research has revolutionized our understanding of the Mesa Verde abandonment. Rather than a mysterious disappearance, it was actually a successful adaptation to changing environmental conditions. The ancestral Puebloans used their extensive trade networks and kinship connections to relocate to the Rio Grande Valley and other areas where water was more abundant. Their descendants became the modern Pueblo peoples, the Hopi, Zuni, and Rio Grande Pueblos, who maintain sophisticated farming traditions and complex ceremonial cycles that echo those of their cliff-dwelling ancestors. Cahokia, America's lost metropolis. In the fertile bottomlands where the Missouri River joins the Mississippi, the remnants of North America's greatest pre-Columbian city rise from the prairie like ancient pyramids on the Nile. These are the mounds of Cahokia, earthen monuments to a sophisticated urban civilization that flourished here 1,000 years ago, when this was the largest city north of Mexico and one of the most impressive urban centers anywhere in the world. At its peak around 1100 CE, Cahokia was home to 10,000 to 20,000 people, with perhaps another 20,000 living in the surrounding communities that formed Greater Cahokia. To put this in perspective, London at the same time had a population of perhaps 25,000 people. This was a city that rivaled the great urban centers of medieval Europe in size and far surpassed them in the ambition of its monumental architecture. The centerpiece of Cahokia was Monk's Mound, a massive earthen pyramid that still dominates the landscape today, rising 100 feet above the surrounding prairie and covering 14 acres at its base. This structure contains more than 22 million cubic feet of earth, making it larger by volume than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed that Monk's Mound was built in multiple stages over several centuries, with each phase representing a massive communal effort that would have required thousands of workers laboring for years. Surrounding Monk's Mound were over 120 smaller mounds arranged around vast plazas that could accommodate thousands of people for ceremonies and gatherings. The Grand Plaza alone covered 50 acres, larger than many modern city parks, and was carefully leveled and maintained as a ceremonial space that served as the heart of Cahokian society. The sophistication of Cahokian society extended far beyond their impressive earthworks. They were master craftspeople who produced elaborate copperwork, marine shell ornaments, and distinctive pottery that has been found across eastern North America. They traded for materials from across the continent: copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, and mica from the Appalachian Mountains, evidence of exchange networks that stretched from the Atlantic to the Rocky Mountains. One of Cahokia's most intriguing features is Woodhenge, a series of circular posts that served as an enormous solar calendar. Like Stonehenge in England, these precisely positioned markers allowed Cahokian astronomers to track the seasons and determine important ceremonial dates. The largest Woodhenge circle contained 48 posts arranged in a circle 410 feet in diameter, with sight lines that marked the summer and winter solstices as well as the spring and autumn equinoxes. The most dramatic evidence of Cahokian social complexity comes from Mound 72, where archaeologists have uncovered elaborate burial practices that reveal a highly stratified society. One burial contained a man in his 40s laid out on a blanket made of 20,000 marine shell beads. Nearby were the remains of 4 men with their heads and hands removed, and the mass burial of 53 young women who appear to have been sacrificed as part of the funeral ritual. These discoveries reveal a society with powerful leaders who commanded the resources and authority to organize massive construction projects and elaborate ceremonies. Yet by 1400 CE, this remarkable city was largely abandoned. The reasons for Cahokia's decline have puzzled archaeologists for decades, generating theories ranging from environmental degradation to political instability to epidemic disease. Recent research by Dr. Caitlin Rankin has debunked one popular theory about Cahokia's collapse. For years, many archaeologists argued that the Cahokians had deforested their region to build their city and fuel their fires, leading to environmental degradation and eventual abandonment. Rankin's detailed analysis of soil cores from the Cahokia region, published in 2024, found no evidence of significant deforestation during the city's occupation. Instead, the evidence points to different factors in the city's decline. Climate change appears to have played a significant role. Dr. Samuel Munoz's research using Mississippi River sediment cores has documented major flooding events that coincided with Cahokia's peak period, followed by a shift to more frequent droughts. These environmental stresses may have made it difficult to sustain such a large urban population in the flood-prone American bottom. Political factors were likely equally important. Cahokia's power appears to have been based on its leaders' ability to organize massive communal projects and control long-distance trade networks. As environmental stresses mounted and competing centers emerged elsewhere in the Midwest, the Cahokian elite may have lost the authority needed to maintain their complex urban society. The abandonment of Cahokia represents one of the most significant demographic collapses in North American prehistory. Unlike the Maya cities that were gradually reclaimed by jungle, or the cliff dwellings that were preserved by the dry desert climate, Cahokia's earthen monuments were slowly eroded by centuries of prairie weather and agricultural plowing. By the time European explorers reached the Mississippi Valley, the great city was just a collection of mysterious mounds, their builders forgotten by history. These American enigmas, Maya, Olmec, Ancestral Puebloan, and Cahokian, remind us that the Western Hemisphere harbored civilizations every bit as sophisticated and mysterious as their Old World counterparts. Their achievements in mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and urban planning rival those of any ancient civilization, while their disappearances pose questions that continue to challenge our understanding of how societies rise, flourish, and transform. Yet perhaps most remarkably, many of these vanished civilizations didn't truly disappear at all. The Maya continue to live throughout Mesoamerica. The Pueblo peoples maintain traditions passed down from their ancestral Puebloan ancestors, and the great earthworks of Cahokia still rise from the prairie as monuments to the ingenuity and ambition of their builders. To this day, these American mysteries continue to yield new secrets as technology reveals hidden cities beneath jungle canopy and DNA analysis traces ancient migration routes. Each discovery adds new chapters to the ongoing story of human achievement and adaptation in the Americas, reminding us that the history of these continents is far richer and more complex than anyone ever imagined. 3. Asian empires in the shadows. While the Americas were witnessing their own cycles of rise and mysterious disappearance, across the Pacific Ocean, vast civilizations were flourishing in landscapes that would challenge every assumption about what ancient peoples could achieve. From the steaming jungles of Cambodia to the highlands of Ethiopia, from the river valleys of China to the thin air of the Bolivian Altiplano, sophisticated empires were creating wonders that would vanish so completely from historical memory that their rediscovery would stun the modern world. These were not the familiar civilizations of textbook history, the Greeks and Romans, the Egyptians and Mesopotamians whose stories have been told and retold for centuries. These were the shadow empires, the forgotten kingdoms whose achievements were so remarkable that early European explorers often refused to believe they had been built by local peoples. Their disappearances were so complete that entire civilizations became myths, their great cities swallowed by jungle or buried beneath desert sand, their technologies forgotten, their very existence erased from the collective memory of humanity. The Khmer Empire anchors hidden secrets. In the dense forests of northern Cambodia, where massive trees draped with strangling vines seem to swallow all evidence of human presence, one of history's most extraordinary archaeological revelations has been slowly unfolding for over a century. Here, hidden beneath the jungle canopy, lies Angkor, not just a temple complex, as early explorers believed, but the remains of the world's largest pre-industrial urban area, a sprawling metropolis that once housed up to 1 million people and controlled an empire stretching from Vietnam to Myanmar. The centerpiece of this lost world is Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument ever built. Rising from the Cambodian plains like a vision from another world, this temple mountain covers 400 acres and required an estimated 300,000 workers and 6,000 elephants to construct. Every surface is covered with intricate carvings telling the stories of Hindu epics and Khmer history, including the famous churning of the Ocean of Milk, a bas-relief over 160 feet long that depicts gods and demons working together to create the elixir of immortality. But Angkor Wat, magnificent as it is, represents only a fraction of what the Khmer Empire achieved. When French explorer Henri Mouhot stumbled upon Angkor in 1860, he saw only a handful of temples emerging from the jungle. It would take revolutionary LiDAR technology in the 21st century to reveal the true scope of what the Khmer had built. The 2012 to 2015 LiDAR surveys conducted by Dr. Damien Evans and his team transformed our understanding of Angkor overnight. Flying aircraft equipped with laser scanners over the forest canopy, they penetrated the vegetation to map the ground surface with unprecedented precision. What they discovered was breathtaking. Angkor was not a collection of isolated temples, but a vast urban landscape covering over 1,000 square kilometers, larger than modern Los Angeles. The LiDAR revealed sophisticated city planning that would impress modern urban engineers. Massive geometric earthworks surrounded the temple complexes, their purpose still mysterious to archaeologists. Some of these structures are enormous spirals covering several acres. Others are complex geometric patterns that seem to serve no obvious practical function. These earthworks required moving millions of cubic meters of soil, representing an investment of labor that rivals the construction of the temples themselves. Most remarkably, the surveys revealed the engineering marvel that made this massive city possible, the most sophisticated hydraulic system of the ancient world. The Khmer had transformed the natural landscape of the Tunnel Sap Basin into an enormous water management machine, with hundreds of kilometers of canals, massive reservoirs called barays, and an intricate network of dikes and channels that captured monsoon rains and distributed water throughout the year. The West Baray alone covers 16 square kilometers and can hold 50 million cubic meters of water, enough to supply a modern city for months. These reservoirs weren't just practical infrastructure. They were also religious symbols representing the cosmic ocean that surrounds Mount Meru, the center of the Hindu universe. The Khmer had literally reshaped their landscape to mirror their understanding of the cosmos. This hydraulic system supported intensive rice cultivation that could feed the massive population of Greater Angkor. Recent research by Dr. Roland Fletcher has shown that the Khmer developed sophisticated techniques for managing water levels, soil fertility, and crop rotation that allowed them to achieve rice yields comparable to modern intensive agriculture. They created a landscape that was simultaneously a technological marvel, an ecological adaptation, and a religious statement. The Khmer Empire reached its zenith under King Jayavarman VII in the early 13th century, controlling trade routes from China to India and maintaining diplomatic relations with kingdoms from Japan to Ceylon. Angkor Thom, Jayavarman's capital city, covered 9 square kilometers and was protected by walls and moats that created an urban fortress capable of withstanding siege warfare. Yet around 1430 CE, this magnificent civilization began its final chapter. The great city that had dominated Southeast Asia for over 600 years was gradually abandoned, its temples left to be consumed by the jungle, its sophisticated water management systems falling into disrepair. The reasons for this abandonment have puzzled historians for centuries. Recent archaeological detective work has revealed that Angkor's collapse was not sudden but gradual, unfolding over more than a century. Dr. Dan Penny's analysis of sediment cores from the Angkor region has documented environmental stresses that began in the late 14th century. The climate became more variable, with periods of severe drought alternating with destructive flooding. The delicate balance of the Khmer hydraulic system, which had sustained the city for centuries, began to break down. Political factors were equally important. The rise of Ayutthaya in present-day Thailand created a powerful rival that repeatedly attacked Khmer territories. These wars disrupted trade networks and drained the empire's resources. Meanwhile, the growth of maritime trade routes reduced the importance of the overland routes that Angkor had long controlled. Most intriguingly, recent archaeological evidence suggests that the Khmer elite began modifying Angkor Wat itself during the final period of occupation. Defensive walls were added to the temple complex, and the elaborate water features that had served ceremonial purposes were converted into defensive moats. These changes reveal a civilization under stress, adapting its most sacred spaces for warfare rather than worship. The abandonment of Angkor was not total. Local communities continued to live in the region, and Buddhist monks maintained some of the temples as religious sites. But the great urban center that had housed 1 million people gradually emptied, its sophisticated infrastructure becoming overgrown with vegetation that would hide its secrets for over 400 years. The Aksumite Kingdom, Africa's forgotten Christian empire. In the highlands of northern Ethiopia, where the landscape rises in dramatic escarpments towards some of Africa's highest peaks, the weathered remains of massive stone obelisks still pierce the sky like ancient skyscrapers. These are the monuments of Aksum, the capital of an empire that once controlled trade networks stretching from the Roman Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, and whose rulers claimed descent from the legendary Queen of Sheba and King Solomon himself. The Kingdom of Aksum represents one of Africa's greatest civilizations and one of history's most overlooked empires. At its height between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE, Aksum was counted among the 4 great powers of the ancient world, alongside Rome, Persia, and China. The Persian prophet Mani listed it as one of the 4 kingdoms of the world, while Roman and Byzantine sources regularly mention Aksumite diplomats and traders in their courts. What made Aksum remarkable was not just its political power but its position as a bridge between worlds. Located on the Red Sea coast of Africa, with territories extending into the Arabian Peninsula, Aksum controlled the trade routes that connected the Mediterranean world with India and the Far East. Aksumite merchants carried Roman gold and wine to Indian markets, returning with Chinese silk, Indian spices, and precious stones that would be distributed throughout the Mediterranean world. The evidence of this cosmopolitan civilization can still be seen in the archaeological record. Aksumite sites have yielded Roman coins and glassware, Indian beads and pottery, and Chinese ceramics, testament to a trading network that spanned continents. But the Aksumites were not merely middlemen. They developed sophisticated industries of their own, including glassmaking, metalworking, and ivory carving that produced luxury goods coveted throughout the ancient world. Perhaps most remarkably, Aksum was one of the first kingdoms in the world to officially adopt Christianity. Around 330 CE, King Ezana converted to Christianity and made it the state religion, even before the Roman Emperor Constantine's conversion transformed the Roman Empire. Aksumite Christianity developed its own distinctive traditions, including the magnificent rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, carved directly into the volcanic bedrock in a display of architectural virtuosity that still astounds visitors today. The monuments that best capture Aksum's grandeur are its massive stone obelisks, called stelae. The largest of these structures, which collapsed in ancient times, would have stood over 100 feet tall and weighed more than 500 tons, making it one of the largest single pieces of stone ever quarried and erected by ancient peoples. These obelisks were carved to resemble multi-story buildings, complete with windows, doors, and architectural details, creating the illusion of skyscrapers built from single blocks of granite. Recent archaeological discoveries have revolutionized our understanding of Aksumite civilization. The Beta Samedi site, excavated between 2009 and 2016, has revealed a 20-hectare administrative center with one of the earliest Christian basilicas in sub-Saharan Africa. The site contains elaborate residential compounds, sophisticated water management systems, and evidence of local craft production that challenges earlier assumptions about the nature of Aksumite society. Most exciting has been the discovery that the Aksumites developed local glass production using techniques that were previously thought to be beyond the capabilities of ancient African societies. Dr. Philippa Payne's analysis of glass artifacts from Beta Samedi has identified distinctively Aksumite glassmaking traditions that produced beads, vessels, and window glass using local materials and indigenous technologies. The multilingual nature of Aksumite civilization is revealed in their inscriptions, which appear in Greek, Guizi, and South Arabian scripts, evidence of a cosmopolitan society that maintained connections across linguistic and cultural boundaries. King Ezana's trilingual inscription at Aksum, which records his military campaigns and conversion to Christianity, is one of the most important historical documents from ancient Africa. Yet this remarkable civilization began to decline around the 7th century CE, and by 1000 CE, the great city of Aksum had been largely abandoned. The reasons for this collapse are complex and still debated by historians. The rise of Islam and the expansion of Arab control over Red Sea trade routes certainly reduced Aksum's commercial importance. Climate research has also revealed evidence of declining rainfall between 730 and 760 CE that may have made agriculture more difficult in the Aksumite highlands. Political factors were equally important. The Aksumite Empire appears to have fragmented into smaller kingdoms as central authority weakened. The capital was eventually moved south to the more defensible highlands, leaving the ancient city of Aksum to slowly decay under the Ethiopian sun. Sangsingdui, China's alien civilization. In the fertile plains of Sichuan province in southwestern China, where the Min River flows toward the mighty Yangtze, one of archaeology's most sensational discoveries has been unfolding since 1986. Here, at a site called Sangsingdui, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a Bronze Age civilization so distinctive and sophisticated that it has forced scholars to completely revise their understanding of ancient China. The story began when local farmers accidentally discovered bronze artifacts while digging an irrigation ditch. What followed was one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. A series of sacrificial pits containing over 1,000 artifacts that seemed to come from an entirely different world than the ancient China known from textbooks. The artifacts from Sangsingdui are unlike anything found elsewhere in ancient China. Bronze masks with protruding eyes and elaborately curved ears seem to depict supernatural beings or shamanic visions. A bronze tree over 12 feet tall features 9 branches adorned with fruits, flowers, and perching birds, possibly representing the cosmic tree that connects heaven and earth in Chinese mythology. Most spectacular of all is a life-size bronze standing figure, the earliest known life-size statue from anywhere in China, depicting a man in elaborate robes standing on a decorated base with his hands positioned as if holding ritual objects. The sophistication of Sangsingdui bronze working far exceeded anything previously known from Bronze Age China. The largest bronze mask weighs over 180 pounds and features gold foil decoration, demonstrating mastery of complex metallurgical techniques. The bronze tree required advanced understanding of casting, joining, and surface treatment that wouldn't be seen elsewhere in China for centuries. Recent discoveries have only deepened the mystery. Between 2020 and 2022, archaeologists discovered 6 additional sacrificial pits at Sangsingdui containing over 13,000 artifacts, including the world's oldest known bronze altar, elaborate jade ornaments, and silk fragments that represent some of the earliest textiles from ancient China. The new discoveries have confirmed that Sangsingdui was not an isolated phenomenon, but the center of a sophisticated civilization that flourished between 1800 and 1100 BCE. What makes Sangsingdui particularly mysterious is how different its artistic traditions are from contemporary Chinese cultures. While other Bronze Age Chinese sites feature the familiar motifs of dragons, phoenixes, and ancestral vessels, Sangsingdui art seems to follow entirely different aesthetic principles. The masks and figures appear to represent a completely different religious and artistic tradition that has no clear parallels elsewhere in ancient China. Recent analysis has revealed that Sangsingdui was the center of an advanced urban civilization covering several square kilometers. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetic surveys have identified the remains of a massive walled city with palace complexes, residential areas, and craft workshops. The city walls, built of rammed earth, enclosed an area of nearly 12 square kilometers, making this one of the largest Bronze Age urban centers in ancient China. The people of Sangsingdui were master craftspeople who worked with bronze, gold, jade, ivory, and silk. They developed distinctive artistic styles that combined realistic representation with fantastical elements, creating artifacts that seem to bridge the gap between the human and divine worlds. Their bronzes show evidence of influence from Southeast Asia and Central Asia, suggesting this was a cosmopolitan civilization with connections extending far beyond China. Around 1100 BCE, Sangsingdui was suddenly abandoned. The reason for this abandonment remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. There are no signs of warfare or destruction. Instead, the evidence suggests a deliberate and carefully orchestrated ritual closure. The sacrificial pits appear to have been filled as part of elaborate ceremonies that may have marked the transfer of political and religious authority to a new location. Some scholars suggest that the Sangsingdui people migrated to the nearby site of Jinsha, where similar but evolved artistic traditions continued for several more centuries. Others argue that climate change or political upheaval may have forced the abandonment. The truth remains elusive, hidden in the bronze masks that continue to gaze at us across the millennia with their enigmatic expressions. Tiwanaku, masters of the high Andes. At an altitude of 12,600 feet above sea level, where the thin air makes even walking difficult for modern visitors, the megalithic ruins of Tiwanaku rise from the shores of Lake Titicaca like monuments left behind by gods. This is one of the highest urban centers ever created by ancient peoples, a civilization that not only survived but thrived in one of the world's most challenging environments for over 500 years before mysteriously disappearing around 1000 CE. Tiwanaku challenges every assumption about what ancient peoples could achieve. The site's most famous structure, the Akapana Pyramid, rises 50 feet above the Altiplano and covers an area larger than a football field, built entirely from massive stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons. This stepped pyramid represents one of the most ambitious construction projects ever undertaken at such extreme altitude. But it is at the nearby site of Pumapunku that Tiwanaku's builders achieved their most extraordinary feats of engineering. Here, enormous blocks of red sandstone and andesite were cut and fitted together with precision that amazes modern engineers. The blocks feature complex interlocking joints, precise right angles, and surfaces so smooth they appear to have been machined. Some blocks have multiple surfaces meeting at exact 90-degree angles, requiring three-dimensional planning and execution that would challenge modern stonemasons. The precision of Pumapunku's stonework is even more remarkable when we consider the challenges of working at 12,600 feet elevation. The thin air contains only 60% of the oxygen available at sea level, making physical labor extremely difficult. Yet somehow, Tiwanaku's builders quarried massive blocks from sites up to 10 kilometers away and transported them across the challenging terrain of the Altiplano. Recent research has revealed that Tiwanaku was much more than an isolated ceremonial center. It was the capital of an empire that controlled trade routes across the Andes and developed sophisticated technologies for surviving in the high-altitude environment. The Tiwanaku people created an agricultural revolution in the Altiplano through their development of raised field systems called sucakalas. These raised fields were an ingenious adaptation to the harsh conditions of the high Andes. By building elevated planting areas surrounded by water-filled canals, the Tiwanaku farmers created microclimates that protected crops from frost and provided drainage during the rainy season. The water in the canals absorbed heat during the day and released it at night, moderating temperature fluctuations that could destroy crops. Modern experiments using traditional sucakalu techniques have achieved potato yields several times higher than conventional Andean farming methods. The Tiwanaku Empire controlled trade networks that extended from the Pacific coast to the Amazon basin. Their merchants carried copper, gold, and precious stones from highland mines to coastal populations, returning with shells, tropical products, and other exotic goods. Tiwanaku textiles and pottery have been found at sites throughout the Andes, evidence of cultural influence that extended far beyond their political boundaries. The civilization's sophisticated understanding of astronomy is evident in their architectural alignments. The Kalasasaya Temple at Tiwanaku features precise alignments with the movements of the sun and stars, allowing Tiwanaku astronomers to track the seasons and coordinate agricultural activities. The famous Gateway of the Sun, carved from a single block of andesite weighing over 10 tons, features a complex calendar system that tracked both solar and lunar cycles. Around 1000 CE, this remarkable high-altitude civilization began to collapse. Recent research using sediment cores from Lake Ororillo has revealed that Tiwanaku's decline coincided with a period of severe drought that lasted from approximately 1000 to 1100 CE. This drought would have made agriculture extremely difficult even with their sophisticated raised field systems, potentially forcing the abandonment of the densely populated urban centers. The end of Tiwanaku was gradual rather than sudden. Archaeological evidence suggests that the great ceremonial centers were slowly abandoned as populations dispersed to smaller settlements that could be sustained with limited agricultural resources. The sophisticated raised field systems fell into disrepair, and the trade networks that had sustained the empire gradually collapsed. Yet Tiwanaku's influence didn't disappear entirely. Many of their agricultural and architectural techniques were adopted by successor cultures, including the Inca, who considered Tiwanaku a sacred site and incorporated many Tiwanaku technologies into their own empire. The raised field systems were still being used by local communities when Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, testament to the enduring value of Tiwanaku innovations. To this day, the megalithic monuments of Tiwanaku continue to inspire wonder and speculation. Local Aymara legends attribute their construction to the god Viracocha, who is said to have created the world at Lake Titicaca. Modern engineers studying the precision stonework at Pumapunku struggle to understand how such accuracy was achieved without modern tools and machinery. These Asian empires, Khmer, Aksumite, Sangsingdui, and Tiwanaku, remind us that sophisticated civilizations emerged independently across the globe, each developing unique solutions to the challenges of their environment. Their disappearances, whether gradual or sudden, violent or peaceful, reveal the complex interplay of environmental, political, and social factors that determine the fate of human societies. Yet perhaps most remarkably, the legacy of these shadow empires continues to influence the modern world. Anchor's hydraulic technologies inspire contemporary water management projects. Aksum's rock-hewn churches remain active centers of Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity, and Tiwanaku's agricultural innovations are being revived to help modern Andean communities adapt to climate change. These civilizations vanished from history, but they did not vanish from the world. Their monuments still rise from jungle and highland. Their technologies still inform modern practices, and their stories continue to challenge our understanding of what human societies can achieve in even the most challenging circumstances. 4. Masters of Stone and Sea. The megalithic precision achieved by the builders of Tiwanaku was not unique to the high Andes. Across the globe, in environments ranging from desert canyons to remote Pacific islands, ancient peoples were pushing the boundaries of what seemed possible with stone, creating monuments that continue to defy explanation. These were civilizations that transformed seemingly impossible landscapes into thriving centers of commerce and culture, masters of both monumental architecture and maritime navigation, who left behind some of history's most enduring mysteries. Unlike the river valley civilizations that built on fertile alluvium or the highland empires that controlled mountain passes, these were peoples who chose to make their homes in some of Earth's most challenging environments. They carved cities from living rock, transported massive statues across ocean expanses, and created trading networks that spanned continents. Their achievements in engineering and navigation were so extraordinary that when European explorers first encountered their monuments, many refused to believe they could have been created by the indigenous peoples they found living nearby. These masters of stone and sea would face their own mysterious ends, some gradual, some catastrophic, all leaving behind questions that archaeologists are still working to answer. Their stories remind us that human ingenuity knows no bounds, but also that even the most impressive civilizations must eventually reckon with the fundamental forces of environment, economics, and social change. The Nabateans, Petra's rose-red mystery. In the heart of the Jordanian desert, where red sandstone cliffs rise like cathedral walls from narrow valleys carved by millennia of flash floods, one of history's most spectacular cities emerges from the rock itself. Petra, the rose-red capital of the Nabatean kingdom, represents perhaps the ultimate achievement in rock-cut architecture, an entire urban center carved directly into the living stone of the desert canyons. The first glimpse of Petra still takes the breath away, even for visitors who have seen countless photographs. After walking through the narrow, winding passage of the Sick, a natural gorge barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, the canyon suddenly opens to reveal the treasury, its elaborate facade carved from the rose-colored sandstone with such precision that it seems to glow in the desert light. This is just the beginning of Petra's wonders. Beyond the treasury stretch miles of carved tombs, temples, houses, and civic buildings, all hewn directly from the multicolored rock faces of the surrounding cliffs. The Nabateans who created this wonder were originally nomadic traders who emerged from the Arabian Peninsula around the 4th century BCE. They chose this seemingly inhospitable location for the most practical of reasons. Petra sat at the crossroads of the ancient world's most lucrative trade routes. Here, the great incense road that carried frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia intersected with routes carrying silk from China, spices from India, and luxury goods from the Mediterranean world. What made the Nabateans remarkable was not just their strategic vision but their mastery of desert survival. In a landscape that receives less than 6 inches of rainfall per year, they created one of the most sophisticated water management systems of the ancient world. They carved channels directly into rock faces to capture the brief but intense rains that occasionally swept through the desert, directing every precious drop into an elaborate network of cisterns, settling tanks, and reservoirs. The scale of this hydraulic engineering is staggering. Petra contains over 200 cisterns with a total capacity of more than 10 million gallons, enough to supply a city of 30,000 people for months without rain. The system included sophisticated features like settling tanks that allowed sand and debris to precipitate out before water entered the main storage areas, and covered channels that minimized evaporation in the harsh desert sun. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed just how extensive Nabatean engineering achievements were. The channels that supplied Petra with water were carved with gradients of just 2 to 4 degrees, precise enough to ensure steady flow without erosion, yet gentle enough to work across dozens of kilometers of rugged terrain. Some aqueducts featured multiple parallel channels, allowing maintenance on one section while water continued to flow through others. The 2024 discovery of an intact tomb beneath the treasury has provided unprecedented insights into Nabatean burial practices and social organization. The tomb contained 12 complete human skeletons along with pottery, jewelry, and other grave goods that reveal the cosmopolitan nature of Nabatean society. Preliminary analysis suggests the burials spanned several centuries, indicating that this was a family tomb used across multiple generations, a practice that required sophisticated understanding of preservation techniques in the desert environment. But the Nabateans were much more than skilled engineers and traders. They were cultural innovators who created a unique artistic synthesis drawing from Arab, Greek, Roman, and Persian traditions. The facades of Petra combine classical Greek and Roman architectural elements with distinctively Nabatean motifs, creating a visual language that was entirely their own. The treasury itself features Corinthian columns and classical pediments alongside eagle capitals and floral designs that reflect Nabatean artistic sensibilities. Their innovations extended to agriculture as well. In the desert around Petra, the Nabateans created terrace gardens and irrigation systems that allowed them to grow crops in one of the world's most arid environments. They developed techniques for soil conservation and water harvesting that enabled them to support a substantial urban population in a region where agriculture should have been impossible. The Nabatean kingdom reached its zenith in the 1st century CE, controlling trade routes from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean and maintaining diplomatic relations with Rome while preserving their independence. Their merchants established trading posts from Damascus to Gaza, and Nabatean pottery has been found as far away as Italy and India, evidence of commercial networks that span the known world. The beginning of the end came in 106 CE when the Roman Emperor Trajan annexed the Nabatean kingdom, incorporating it into the new province of Arabia Petrea. Initially, Petra continued to thrive under Roman rule, with new construction projects and continued maintenance of the water systems. However, gradual changes in trade routes and a catastrophic earthquake in 363 CE began the city's long decline. The earthquake appears to have been particularly devastating to Petra's infrastructure. Recent archaeological evidence shows that many of the sophisticated water channels were damaged beyond repair, and several major buildings collapsed. While some areas were rebuilt, the city never fully recovered its former prosperity. As maritime trade routes became more important and overland caravan traffic declined, Petra's strategic location became less valuable. By the 7th century CE, when Islamic armies conquered the region, Petra had already been largely abandoned. The great trading city that had controlled the wealth of Arabia for over 700 years gradually emptied, its carved facades left to face the desert winds alone. Local Bedouin tribes continued to use some of the caves and tombs as shelter, but the sophisticated urban civilization that had created this wonder was gone. Easter Island, walking statues and ecological collapse. Nearly 2,300 miles from the nearest inhabited land, in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, a small triangular island holds some of archaeology's most enigmatic monuments. Easter Island, known to its inhabitants as Rapa Nui, is one of the most isolated places on Earth, yet it became home to a sophisticated Polynesian civilization that created nearly 1,000 massive stone statues called moai that continue to capture the human imagination. The story of how people first reached this remote island reads like an epic of human courage and navigational genius. Sometime around 1200 CE, Polynesian voyagers in double-hulled canoes navigated across thousands of miles of open ocean using only their knowledge of stars, currents, and wave patterns to find this tiny speck of land. These were arguably the greatest navigators in human history, people who had already colonized islands from Hawaii to New Zealand using traditional wayfinding techniques that modern science is only beginning to understand. The first Polynesian settlers found an island paradise. Easter Island was covered with the largest palm forest in the Pacific, home to millions of seabirds, and surrounded by waters rich with fish and marine mammals. The volcanic soil was fertile, the climate was mild, and there was ample fresh water. It seemed like the perfect environment for establishing a new Polynesian society. Over the following centuries, the Rapa Nui people created one of the most distinctive cultures in the Pacific. They developed their own written script, Rongorongo, one of only a handful of writing systems ever created in Oceania. They built sophisticated stone platforms called ahu that served as ceremonial centers and burial sites. Most famously, they carved the moai, massive statues representing deified ancestors that watched over the island communities with eternal vigilance. The moai are engineering marvels that continue to puzzle archaeologists. The largest completed statue stands over 30 feet tall and weighs approximately 75 tons, while an unfinished moai at the quarry site of Reino Raraku would have stood nearly 70 feet tall if completed, making it one of the largest stone statues ever attempted by any ancient civilization. These monuments were carved using only stone tools from the volcanic tuff of Reino Raraku, then somehow transported across the island to their final positions on ceremonial platforms. For decades, archaeologists debated how the Rapa Nui people could have moved these massive statues across the rugged terrain of Easter Island. Recent experimental archaeology by Dr. Carl Lippo and Dr. Terry Hunt has provided a remarkable answer. The moai could walk, using ropes attached to the statue's head and base. Teams of people could rock the moai forward in a coordinated motion that allowed the statues to move upright across the landscape. This discovery revolutionized our understanding of Rapa Nui engineering and social organization. Moving the largest moai would have required teams of up to 90 people working in perfect coordination, suggesting a highly organized society capable of mobilizing large groups for complex projects. The fact that nearly 400 moai were successfully transported from the quarry to ceremonial sites across the island testifies to centuries of accumulated expertise in statue-moving techniques. Recent discoveries have added new dimensions to our understanding of Rapa Nui civilization. In 2023, researchers discovered a previously unknown moai in the dried bed of Reino Raraku Lake, revealed when drought conditions lowered the water level. This statue, unlike most others, features intricate body carvings that were hidden beneath centuries of sediment accumulation, suggesting that many moai may have artistic details that remain undiscovered. The traditional narrative of Easter Island has long portrayed it as the ultimate cautionary tale of ecological collapse, a civilization that destroyed its environment and consequently destroyed itself. According to this ecocide theory, the Rapa Nui people deforested their island to move the moai, leading to soil erosion, agricultural collapse, and societal breakdown that culminated in warfare, cannibalism, and population crash. However, Recent research has fundamentally challenged this narrative. Dr. Hunt and Dr. Lippo's comprehensive analysis of Easter Island's environmental and archaeological record has revealed a very different story. The palm forest appears to have been destroyed primarily by Polynesian rats that arrived with the first settlers and ate the palm seeds, preventing forest regeneration. The island's population appears to have remained stable at around 3,000 to 4,000 people right up until European contact, with no evidence of the dramatic population crash predicted by the ecocide theory. The real catastrophe that befell Easter Island came not from internal ecological collapse but from external contact. European diseases introduced after 1722 devastated the population, while Peruvian slave raids in the 1860s removed over 1,500 people, including most of the island's chiefs and priests, effectively destroying the traditional social structure. The population bottleneck was so severe that by 1877, only 111 Rapa Nui people remained alive on the island. This revisionist understanding of Easter Island's history has important implications for how we interpret the moai and their meaning. Rather than monuments to ecological destruction, the statues appear to represent a successful adaptation to the island's challenging environment. The Rapa Nui people developed sustainable agricultural practices using stone mulching techniques that increased soil fertility, created innovative aquaculture systems in freshwater crater lakes, and maintained their complex statue-building traditions for over 500 years. The megalith builders, secrets written in stone. Across the globe, from the windswept moors of Britain to the sun-baked plains of Malta, ancient peoples created monuments from massive stones that continue to defy explanation. These megalithic builders, working with blocks weighing tens or even hundreds of tons, achieved feats of engineering that challenge our understanding of what was possible with Neolithic technology. The most famous of these monuments is Stonehenge, but it represents just one example of a worldwide megalithic tradition that spanned millennia and continents. In Malta, the temples of Gantija predate Stonehenge by over 1,000 years, featuring massive limestone blocks fitted together with precision that rivals later classical architecture. In Turkey, Göbekli Tepe pushes the origins of monumental stone architecture back to the very beginning of agriculture, with carved pillars and elaborate reliefs created by hunter-gatherer societies 11,000 years ago. Recent discoveries have revealed just how sophisticated these ancient monument builders were. At Stonehenge, researchers have discovered that the massive sarsen stones were shaped using techniques that created acoustic properties throughout the stone circle. The monument appears to have been designed as a kind of ancient amphitheater, with sound engineering that amplified voices and created resonance effects during ceremonies. The logistical achievements of the megalith builders were equally impressive. The bluestones at Stonehenge were transported from Wales, a distance of over 150 miles, sometime around 3000 BCE. Recent research has revealed that these stones came from multiple quarries in the Pres Eli Hills, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of stone properties and sustained contact between distant communities. In 2024, researchers made a stunning discovery about Stonehenge's construction. The massive altar stone at the center of the monument came not from Wales, as previously thought, but from Scotland, a distance of over 400 miles. This finding suggests that the builders of Stonehenge maintained connections across the entire British Isles and were willing to transport materials across unprecedented distances to complete their vision. The purpose of these megalithic monuments remains one of archaeology's great mysteries. They clearly served astronomical functions. Many are aligned with solstices, equinoxes, or lunar cycles, but they were also burial sites, ceremonial centers, and possibly territorial markers. Recent research suggests they may have served as gathering places where dispersed communities came together for seasonal ceremonies, trade, and social bonding. The megalithic tradition eventually faded as Bronze Age technologies and social structures replaced Neolithic ways of life. Yet these monuments continue to inspire wonder and speculation. Their builders created structures that have lasted for thousands of years, using techniques that in some cases we still don't fully understand. The masters of stone and sea, Nabateans, Rapa Nui, and megalith builders, remind us that human creativity flourishes even in the most challenging environments. These civilizations chose to build with permanence in mind, creating monuments that would outlast their creators by millennia. Their achievements in engineering, navigation, and astronomical observation laid foundations for later civilizations while creating mysteries that continue to challenge our understanding of the past. Yet their stories also remind us of the fragility of human achievement. The Nabateans saw their trade routes superseded by maritime commerce. The Rapa Nui faced devastating population collapse from disease and slave raids, and the megalith builders gradually abandoned their monument-building traditions as their societies transformed. To this day, these civilizations continue to yield new secrets as modern technology reveals hidden details of their achievements. Each discovery adds new chapters to our understanding of human capability and the endless creativity that emerges when people are determined to create something lasting in an impermanent world. 5. Legendary Lost Worlds. The monuments left behind by the Nabateans, the Moai of Easter Island, and the megaliths of prehistoric Europe prove that reality can be more extraordinary than fiction. Yet their very existence raises a tantalizing question. If such remarkable civilizations could flourish and then vanish so completely that they became myths, how many others might have disappeared entirely, leaving behind only legends and half-remembered stories passed down through generations of storytellers? This is where archaeology meets the realm of legend, where ancient texts describe civilizations so advanced and so completely lost that scholars have debated for centuries whether they ever existed at all. These are not the documented disappearances of the Maya or the Mycenaeans, whose ruins we can visit and whose artifacts fill museums. These are the legendary lost worlds that exist primarily in ancient writings, oral traditions, and the collective imagination of humanity. Yet some contain kernels of truth that continue to drive archaeological exploration to this day. The boundary between history and legend is often thinner than we might expect. Troy was dismissed as mythology until Heinrich Schliemann proved it was real. The Minoan civilization was unknown to history until Sir Arthur Evans uncovered the palaces of Crete. Even today, underwater archaeologists are discovering submerged cities that were once thought to be pure fantasy. In this shadowy realm where fact and fiction intertwine, the most famous lost civilizations of all continue to capture our imagination and challenge our understanding of what might be possible. Atlantis, when philosophy becomes obsession. No lost civilization has captured the human imagination more powerfully than Atlantis, the island empire described by the Greek philosopher Plato in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias around 360 BCE. For over 2,400 years, this story of a magnificent civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night has inspired countless expeditions, theories, and debates about what Plato really meant and whether any part of his account might be based on historical fact. Plato's description of Atlantis is remarkably detailed for what most scholars consider a philosophical allegory. He places the island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, modern Gibraltar, in the Atlantic Ocean, describing it as larger than Libya and Asia combined. According to his account, Atlantis was settled by Poseidon, god of the sea, who fell in love with a mortal woman named Cleito and created the island as a paradise for their descendants. The capital city, also called Atlantis, was built in a series of concentric rings, alternating bands of land and water connected by bridges and tunnels. The innermost island contained a magnificent palace and temple to Poseidon, decorated with gold, silver, and orichalcum, a mysterious metal that was supposedly found nowhere else on Earth. The Atlanteans were master engineers who created elaborate harbors, built magnificent buildings, and developed advanced technologies that made their empire the most powerful in the ancient world. For thousands of years, Atlantis ruled justly and prospered, but gradually the divine nature of its rulers became diluted through intermarriage with mortals. The Atlanteans became corrupted by pride and greed, seeking to conquer the entire Mediterranean world. When they attacked Athens, however, they met their match in the virtuous Athenians, who defeated them in battle. Soon after, as punishment for their hubris, Zeus sent earthquakes and floods that caused Atlantis to sink beneath the sea in a single catastrophic day and night. Plato presents the story as historical fact, claiming it was passed down from the great Athenian lawgiver Solon, who had learned it from Egyptian priests during his travels. The priests allegedly told Solon that their temple records went back 9,000 years and contained accounts of many civilizations that had risen and fallen, including the story of Atlantis and its war with prehistoric Athens. Most classical scholars have interpreted Atlantis as Plato's philosophical invention, an allegory designed to illustrate his ideas about ideal government and the dangers of imperial overreach. The story serves Plato's broader philosophical purposes perfectly. It shows how even the most advanced civilization can fall if it abandons virtue for material power, and it creates a mythical golden age of Athens to contrast with the decline he saw in his own time. Yet the very precision of Plato's description has convinced some researchers that he might have been drawing on genuine historical memories, even if heavily embellished. The concentric ring structure of Atlantis resembles real Bronze Age sites like the Minoan Palace at Knossos or the circular earthworks found at various prehistoric sites. The description of Atlantean naval power and the sudden catastrophic destruction by earthquake and flood parallels what we now know about real Bronze Age civilizations. The most compelling historical parallel is with the Minoan civilization of Crete, which was devastated by the massive volcanic eruption at Thera, modern Santorini, around 1600 BCE. This eruption was one of the largest in human history, creating tsunamis that swept across the Aegean and depositing volcanic ash across the eastern Mediterranean. Some scholars argue that memories of this catastrophe, transmitted through Egyptian sources, could have inspired Plato's account of Atlantis. Dr. Christos Domas, who led excavations at Akrotiri on Santorini, has documented how the Thera eruption preserved a sophisticated Bronze Age city under layers of volcanic ash, creating a Mediterranean Pompeii that reveals the advanced civilization that existed in the Aegean before the catastrophe. The Minoan-influenced culture revealed at Akrotiri featured multi-story buildings, elaborate frescoes, sophisticated plumbing systems, and evidence of far-reaching trade networks that match many details in Plato's description of Atlantis. Modern underwater archaeology has added fascinating new dimensions to Atlantis research. The discovery of genuine submerged cities like Thonis Heraklion off the coast of Egypt, Pavlopetri off Greece, and Dvarka off India proves that sophisticated ancient cities could indeed be lost beneath the waves. Dr. Frank Gaudio's excavations at Thonis Heraklion have revealed a complete ancient Egyptian port city that sank into the Mediterranean due to earthquakes and subsidence, showing that the core premise of Atlantis, an advanced civilization lost beneath the sea, is entirely plausible. Yet despite over a century of underwater exploration, no archaeological evidence for Plato's specific Atlantis has ever been found. The Atlantic Ocean floor has been mapped in detail, revealing no submerged continents or island civilizations. Geological evidence conclusively shows that no large landmass has existed in the Atlantic in the timeframe Plato describes. This has led to increasingly creative attempts to locate Atlantis in other locations. Researchers have proposed sites from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean, from Antarctica to Indonesia. Each theory typically involves reinterpreting Plato's text, arguing that the priests made errors in translation, that Plato confused directions or timeframes, or that the story has been corrupted through centuries of transmission. One of the most sophisticated recent theories comes from geologist Dr. Marc-André Gutchier, who has suggested that Atlantis might be based on the ancient city of Tartessos in southwestern Spain. This real Bronze Age civilization controlled the metal trade in the western Mediterranean and suddenly vanished around 500 BCE, within living memory of Plato's time. Gutchier argues that tsunami deposits in the region show evidence of catastrophic flooding that could have destroyed coastal settlements and given rise to legends of a lost civilization. Lemuria and Mu, continents that never were. While Atlantis has ancient roots in classical literature, the lost continents of Lemuria and Mu represent a more modern mythology, one that began with legitimate scientific speculation in the 19th century before evolving into elaborate pseudo-archaeological fantasies that continue to influence popular culture today. The story begins in 1864 with British zoologist Philip Sclater, who was trying to solve a genuine scientific puzzle. Sclater had noticed that lemur fossils were found in Madagascar and India but nowhere in between, despite the fact that lemurs couldn't have crossed the Indian Ocean. To explain this distribution, he proposed that a land bridge or continent he called Lemuria had once connected Madagascar with India, allowing lemurs to spread across this now submerged landmass. Sclater's Lemuria hypothesis was serious science for its time, before the theory of plate tectonics explained how continents actually moved and before we understood that species distribution patterns could be explained by continental drift rather than sunken land bridges. Many prominent 19th-century scientists supported the Lemuria hypothesis as the best available explanation for biogeographical puzzles. However, Lemuria took on a life of its own when it was adopted by occultists and spiritualists looking for a lost homeland for humanity. Madame Helena Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical movement, claimed that Lemuria had been the home of the third root race of humanity, spiritually advanced beings who were eventually destroyed by their misuse of psychic powers. According to Blavatsky's elaborate mythology, the Lemurians were 15-foot-tall hermaphrodites who communicated telepathically and possessed advanced technology that combined science with magic. The Lemuria myth reached its most elaborate form in the writings of James Churchward, a British colonel who claimed to have discovered ancient tablets in India that told the true history of human civilization. In a series of books beginning with The Lost Continent of Mu in 1926, Churchward described Mu as a massive Pacific continent that had been home to 64 million people and served as the original Garden of Eden. According to Churchward's fantastical account, Mu was an advanced civilization that developed aircraft, atomic energy, and anti-gravity technology over 50,000 years ago. The Muians supposedly established colonies around the world, explaining the similarities between ancient monuments in different continents. Eventually, however, gas-filled caverns beneath Mu collapsed, causing the entire continent to sink beneath the Pacific in a catastrophe that killed all 64 million inhabitants except for a few survivors who escaped to become the ancestors of various ancient civilizations. Churchward claimed his information came from ancient tablets written in the Naacal language, but he never produced these tablets or provided credible evidence for their existence. Modern scholars have identified his Naacal symbols as a mixture of Mayan hieroglyphs, Hindu Sanskrit, and symbols from various other real writing systems, apparently cobbled together to create the appearance of an ancient script. From a geological perspective, both Lemuria and Mu are impossible. The Pacific Ocean floor is composed of dense basaltic rock that could never have supported continental landmasses. Core samples from the Pacific show continuous marine sedimentation going back hundreds of millions of years, with no evidence of submerged continents. The theory of plate tectonics, developed in the 1960s, completely explained species distribution patterns without requiring sunken land bridges. Yet despite being thoroughly debunked by modern science, Lemuria and Mu continue to capture popular imagination. New Age movements have embraced these lost continents as spiritual homelands, while some Pacific Islander groups have incorporated Lemuria into their cultural narratives as a way of asserting the antiquity and sophistication of Pacific civilizations. El Dorado, the Golden Man's real kingdom. Unlike Atlantis or Lemuria, El Dorado began as a genuine historical reality before transforming into legend. The name, which means the Golden One in Spanish, originally referred not to a place but to a person, specifically, to a ceremony practiced by the Muisca people of Highland Colombia in which a new chief would cover himself in gold dust and make offerings to the gods by throwing precious objects into Lake Guatavita. Spanish conquistadors first heard reports of this ceremony in the 1530s and became obsessed with finding the source of all this gold. Over time, El Dorado evolved from a description of a ritual into the name of a mythical city, then into a golden kingdom, and finally into a lost civilization somewhere in the South American interior that possessed unlimited wealth. The real El Dorado ceremony was one of the most elaborate rituals ever documented in the Americas. According to Spanish chroniclers who interviewed Muisca survivors, the ceremony took place when a new cacique, chief, assumed power. The future ruler would fast and remain in seclusion for several years before undergoing the ritual that would confirm his authority. On the appointed day, the cacique would travel to Lake Guatavita accompanied by 4 principal chiefs and hundreds of followers. At the center of the lake, on a raft made of rushes and decorated with gold and precious stones, the cacique would strip naked and cover his entire body with gold dust applied over a sticky resin. The 4 accompanying chiefs would place offerings of gold and emeralds at his feet. As the sun rose, the raft would be launched into the lake while thousands of people on the shore played music, burned incense, and chanted prayers. When the raft reached the center of the lake, the cacique would dive into the water, washing off the gold dust as an offering to the gods. The chiefs would then throw all the gold and emeralds into the lake, completing a ceremony that represented the spiritual transformation of a man into a divine ruler. Archaeological evidence confirms that this ceremony actually took place. Attempts to drain Lake Guatavita in 1965 and 1969 recovered over 4,000 pieces of gold and emerald offerings, along with pottery and other artifacts dating from approximately 600 to 1600 CE. The most famous artifact associated with the ceremony is the Muisca raft, a gold figurine discovered in 1969 that depicts the El Dorado ceremony in exquisite detail, showing the cacique and 4 chiefs on a raft surrounded by smaller figures and ceremonial objects. Recent research by Dr. Carl-Henrik Langebeek has revealed that the Muisca were far more sophisticated than Spanish accounts suggested. They were master goldsmiths who developed advanced techniques for creating complex alloys and intricate decorative objects. They built extensive trade networks that brought emeralds from local mines and salt from highland lakes to exchange for cotton, coca, and other products from warmer climates. The Muisca also developed sophisticated agricultural techniques for their high-altitude environment. They created raised field systems in the wetlands around Bogotá that increased crop yields and provided protection from flooding. Their settlements were carefully planned, with residential areas, ceremonial centers, and agricultural zones integrated into sustainable land use patterns. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1530s, they found a thriving confederation of Muisca chiefdoms controlling the highlands around present-day Bogotá. The Spanish quickly conquered these settlements and began extracting gold and emeralds, but they were disappointed to discover that the Muisca wealth came from trade and skilled craftsmanship rather than from vast gold mines. The legend of El Dorado as a golden city grew as Spanish expeditions pushed deeper into the South American interior searching for the source of Muisca gold. Explorers like Gonzalo Pizarro and Sir Walter Raleigh launched increasingly desperate expeditions into the Amazon basin, convinced that somewhere in the jungle lay a city where gold was so common it covered the buildings and streets. These expeditions found no golden cities, but they did encounter sophisticated indigenous civilizations that the Spanish often described in terms borrowed from El Dorado legends. Recent archaeological research in the Amazon has revealed that some of these descriptions may have been more accurate than previously believed. Dr. Michael Heckenberger's work in the Upper Xingu region has documented large pre-Columbian settlements with elaborate earthworks, sophisticated agricultural systems, and evidence of complex political organization that could have supported substantial populations. The search for El Dorado contributed to one of history's most extensive exploration efforts, leading to the mapping of much of South America and contact with hundreds of indigenous groups. While no golden city was ever found, these expeditions documented real civilizations that were often as remarkable as the legends that inspired the search. The persistence of legend. The legendary lost worlds of Atlantis, Lemuria, and El Dorado serve as powerful reminders of humanity's endless fascination with vanished civilizations and lost golden ages. While none of these places existed exactly as described in legend, each contains elements of historical truth that help explain their enduring appeal. Atlantis may have been inspired by real Bronze Age catastrophes like the Thera eruption or the collapse of Minoan civilization. Lemuria began as a legitimate scientific hypothesis before evolving into fantasy. El Dorado was based on a real ceremony and real wealth, even if the Golden City itself was mythical. Perhaps most importantly, these legends have inspired real discoveries. The search for Atlantis has driven advances in underwater archaeology that have revealed genuine lost cities beneath the waves. Interest in Lemuria and Mu has encouraged research into Pacific prehistory that has documented the remarkable achievements of ancient Polynesian navigators. The El Dorado expeditions opened up an entire continent to scientific exploration and led to the documentation of sophisticated Amazonian civilizations. Modern technology continues to blur the line between legend and reality. Satellite imagery reveals previously unknown archaeological sites, underwater vehicles explore the deepest ocean trenches, and DNA analysis traces ancient migrations across the globe. Each year brings new discoveries that challenge our assumptions about what ancient peoples could achieve and how much of their history might have been lost. To this day, these legendary civilizations continue to evolve, incorporating new scientific discoveries and contemporary concerns. Modern versions of Atlantis often feature advanced technology and environmental messages, while New Age interpretations of Lemuria emphasize spiritual development and ancient wisdom. El Dorado has become a metaphor for any elusive treasure or unattainable goal. The enduring power of these legends lies not in their literal truth but in what they represent. The human conviction that there must be more to our past than we currently know, that somewhere in the lost corridors of time, our ancestors achieved wonders that we have yet to understand or rediscover. In an age when satellite imagery has mapped every square kilometer of Earth's surface and deep-sea vehicles have explored the ocean's depths, these legends remind us that mystery and wonder can still be found in the shadows between history and imagination. Whether buried beneath desert sands, hidden under jungle canopy, or lost beneath the waves, the search for vanished civilizations continues to drive archaeological exploration and capture human imagination. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of human achievement and reminds us that the boundary between legend and reality is often far thinner than we might expect. 6. Patterns of collapse. The legends of Atlantis, Lemuria, and El Dorado capture our imagination precisely because they echo a deeper truth that archaeological evidence has confirmed across cultures and millennia. Even the most advanced and seemingly stable civilizations can disappear with shocking suddenness. Yet, as we step back from the individual stories of vanished peoples, from the sophisticated water engineers of the Indus Valley to the master navigators of Easter Island, a more sobering picture emerges. These disappearances were not random accidents of history, but follow recognizable patterns that repeat across time and geography with unsettling consistency. The great civilizations we have explored did not collapse in isolation. Their failures were interconnected, part of larger systemic breakdowns that reveal fundamental vulnerabilities in complex human societies. When we map these patterns across the archaeological record, a disturbing realization emerges. The same forces that brought down the palace civilizations of the Bronze Age, emptied the great Maya cities, and scattered the cliff dwellers of Mesa Verde are still operating in our world today, perhaps more powerfully than ever before. The common thread: why civilizations fall. Across the ruins of Angkor and the abandoned pueblos of Mesa Verde, through the silt-covered streets of Harapan cities and the jungle-shrouded pyramids of Tikal, archaeologists have identified remarkably consistent patterns in how sophisticated societies collapse. These patterns suggest that civilizational failure is not a mysterious force that strikes randomly, but a predictable outcome when certain stresses accumulate beyond a society's capacity to adapt. The most comprehensive analysis of these patterns comes from historian Joseph Tainter, whose groundbreaking research has identified what he calls the collapse of complex societies. Tainter's work reveals that civilizations don't usually fall because of single catastrophic events, but because they become trapped in cycles of increasing complexity that eventually exceed the benefits they provide. As societies grow more sophisticated, they require ever more energy and resources to maintain their complexity, until the costs of maintaining the system begin to exceed what it can produce. This principle explains why so many great civilizations seem to be at the height of their power just before they collapsed. The Maya cities that were abandoned during the 9th century CE had recently completed some of their most ambitious construction projects. Mycenaean Greece was building its most massive fortifications just before the palace system collapsed entirely. The elaborate cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde represent the pinnacle of ancestral Puebloan architecture, yet they were occupied for less than a century before being abandoned. The archaeological record reveals several critical vulnerabilities that appear repeatedly in collapsing civilizations. Environmental stress, particularly climate change, emerges as perhaps the most consistent factor. Social stratification and inequality create internal tensions that weaken society's ability to respond to external challenges. Economic specialization, while enabling remarkable achievements, also creates dependencies that become fatal when trade networks are disrupted. Political centralization allows for impressive coordination during good times but creates single points of failure when leadership systems break down. Perhaps most critically, the very innovations that enable civilizations to thrive often contain the seeds of their destruction. The sophisticated water management systems that allowed Angkor to support 1 million people became catastrophic vulnerabilities when climate change disrupted rainfall patterns. The extensive trade networks that brought prosperity to Bronze Age palaces became pathways for the spread of warfare and destruction during the late Bronze Age collapse. The intensive agriculture that supported dense populations in the Maya lowlands accelerated soil exhaustion and made societies more vulnerable to drought. Dr. Peter Turchin's quantitative analysis of historical societies has identified what he calls secular cycles in civilizational development. According to Turchin's research, societies tend to follow predictable patterns of growth, crisis, and transformation that repeat over periods of several centuries. During the growth phase, population increases, wealth accumulates, and institutional complexity develops. This eventually leads to what Turchin calls the crisis phase, characterized by elite overproduction, social inequality, political instability, and competition for resources. Societies either successfully navigate this crisis through institutional reform or undergo partial or complete collapse. Climate, complexity, and catastrophe. The role of climate change in civilizational collapse has become increasingly clear as paleoclimatologists develop more sophisticated methods for reconstructing ancient weather patterns. Core samples from lakes and ice sheets, tree ring chronologies, and isotope analysis of ancient shells and bones have created detailed climate records that often correlate precisely with archaeological evidence of societal stress and collapse. The story told by this evidence is sobering. The late Bronze Age collapse coincided with one of the most severe droughts in Mediterranean history, documented in sediment cores from across the region. The classic Maya collapse occurred during what researchers call the Terminal Classic Drought, a 200-year period of reduced rainfall that was particularly severe between 800 and 1000 CE. The abandonment of Mesa Verde corresponds exactly with the Great Drought of 1276 to 1299 CE, documented with year-by-year precision in tree ring records from across the southwest. The Indus Valley civilization faced a particularly devastating climate challenge. Dr. Yama Dixit's research using oxygen isotope ratios in ancient shells has documented a dramatic weakening of the monsoon system beginning around 1200 BCE. The life-giving rains that had sustained Harappan agriculture for over a millennium became increasingly unreliable, forcing the gradual abandonment of cities that had thrived for centuries. Climate stress alone, however, rarely destroys civilizations directly. Instead, it acts as what researchers call a threat multiplier, exacerbating existing social tensions and overwhelming adaptive mechanisms. When the rains failed in the Maya lowlands, the result wasn't immediate starvation, but increased warfare between city-states competing for remaining water sources. When drought struck the American Southwest, ancestral Puebloan communities didn't simply die out. They migrated to more reliable water sources, using kinship networks and trade relationships that had been developed over centuries. The civilizations that survived climate challenges were typically those with flexible institutions, diverse resource bases, and strong social cohesion. The northern Maya managed to adapt to the same drought that devastated the classic Maya cities, developing new agricultural techniques and shifting to coastal trade networks. Egyptian civilization survived multiple climate crises by maintaining strong central authority and developing sophisticated methods for managing Nile flood cycles. But climate change becomes truly catastrophic when it intersects with other forms of complexity stress. The Bronze Age civilizations that collapsed around 1200 BCE were already under pressure from the costs of maintaining their elaborate palace systems when drought and earthquake storms delivered additional shocks. The Maya cities had pushed agricultural intensification to its limits when the Terminal Classic Drought made their farming systems unsustainable. Recent research has revealed how environmental and social stresses can create cascading failures that overwhelm even sophisticated adaptive mechanisms. Dr. Vernon Scarborough's work on Maya water management has shown how the elaborate reservoir systems that sustained major cities could become toxic during drought conditions, concentrating algae and bacteria that made stored water undrinkable. What had been an adaptive advantage became a fatal liability when environmental conditions changed. The complexity trap. One of the most unsettling insights from collapse research is that many civilizations fell not because they were primitive or poorly organized, but because they became too complex for their own good. This complexity trap emerges when societies develop institutional structures, technological systems, and social hierarchies that require ever-increasing energy and resources to maintain. The classic example is the Roman Empire, which grew so large and complex that the costs of administration, defense, and infrastructure eventually exceeded the economic benefits of imperial expansion. But the same pattern appears in smaller-scale societies throughout the archaeological record. The elaborate ceremonial centers of the Maya required enormous investments of labor and resources that were sustainable during periods of population growth and agricultural surplus but became crushing burdens during times of stress. Complexity creates what researchers call systemic risk, vulnerabilities that emerge from the interactions between different parts of a system rather than from any single component. The Bronze Age palace economies were marvels of organization that enabled unprecedented levels of craft specialization, long-distance trade, and monumental construction. But their very sophistication made them vulnerable to disruption. When trade networks were severed by warfare or natural disasters, specialized craftsmen could no longer obtain raw materials, royal administrators could no longer collect taxes, and the entire system could collapse within a generation. Modern computer modeling of ancient societies has revealed how quickly complex systems can transition from stability to collapse. Dr. Sander van der Lee's research using complexity theory to model past civilizations shows that societies often experience what scientists call phase transitions. Rapid shifts from one stable state to another that can appear sudden, even when the underlying stresses have been building for decades. The Maya city-states provide a particularly clear example of complexity-driven collapse. Each major center developed elaborate hierarchies of nobles, priests, scribes, artists, and administrators who were supported by agricultural surplus from the surrounding countryside. These elites competed with each other through increasingly expensive displays of wealth and power, building larger pyramids, commissioning more elaborate artwork, and conducting more costly warfare. Archaeological evidence shows that elite consumption was consuming an ever larger share of social resources just before the classic collapse, suggesting that the system had become unsustainable even before the drought delivered the final blow. Cascading failures and perfect storms. The most catastrophic collapses often result not from single causes, but from what researchers call perfect storms, combinations of environmental, social, and political stresses that overwhelm society's adaptive capacity. The Late Bronze Age collapse exemplifies this pattern, with climate change, seismic activity, political instability, and population movements all contributing to a civilizational breakdown that affected the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Recent interdisciplinary research has revealed how these factors can interact in devastating ways. Dr. Eric Klein's comprehensive analysis of the Bronze Age collapse shows how drought conditions may have triggered population movements that destabilized political systems, while earthquake damage weakened defensive capabilities just as external threats were increasing. The result was a cascade of failures that brought down multiple civilizations within a few generations. The Aksumite Empire faced a similar convergence of challenges. Climate research has documented declining rainfall in the Ethiopian highlands beginning around 730 CE, just as the rise of Islamic power was disrupting Red Sea trade routes. Political inscriptions from this period record increasing warfare and social unrest, suggesting that environmental and economic stresses were combining to overwhelm the kingdom's adaptive capacity. Even smaller-scale societies could be vulnerable to cascading failures. The abandonment of Cahokia appears to have resulted from a combination of environmental stresses, including increased flooding and periodic droughts, political instability reflected in changes to monumental architecture, and possible competition from emerging centers elsewhere in the Midwest. No single factor was sufficient to destroy this remarkable urban center, but their combined impact made the city unsustainable. The acceleration factor. One of the most troubling patterns in collapse research is what might be called the acceleration factor, the tendency for complex societies to fail more rapidly as they become more sophisticated and interconnected. While early agricultural societies might decline gradually over centuries, more complex civilizations often experience sudden collapse within decades or even years. This acceleration occurs because complex societies develop what systems theorists call tight coupling, direct connections between different parts of the system that allow problems to spread rapidly throughout the entire network. The Bronze Age palace economies were tightly coupled systems where disruption to trade networks could quickly affect craft production, religious ceremonies, political administration, and military defense. When the system began to fail, the failure spread rapidly through all these interconnected domains. Modern research has revealed how technological sophistication can actually increase vulnerability to collapse. The elaborate water management systems of Angkor were engineering marvels that could support enormous populations during normal conditions, but they required constant maintenance and coordination that became impossible during periods of political instability. When these systems failed, the consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The Maya provide another example of how sophistication can increase fragility. Their mathematical and astronomical achievements were remarkable, but they were based on complex calendrical systems that required specialized knowledge to maintain. When the scribal classes who preserved this knowledge were disrupted during the collapse period, these sophisticated intellectual achievements were quickly lost. Lessons for our modern world. The patterns revealed by collapse research have sobering implications for contemporary civilization. Many of the vulnerabilities that destroyed ancient societies, climate change, resource depletion, social inequality, political instability, and increasing complexity, are present in our modern world, often at unprecedented scales. Climate change represents perhaps the most obvious parallel. While ancient societies faced regional climate variability, modern civilization confronts global climate change that is occurring more rapidly than most historical precedents. The sophisticated infrastructure systems that enable modern urban life, power grids, transportation networks, supply chains, communication systems, are potentially as vulnerable to climate disruption as the water management systems of Angkor or the agricultural terraces of the Maya. Social inequality has reached levels in many modern societies that exceed those recorded in most ancient civilizations. Research by economists like Thomas Piketty has documented how wealth concentration can undermine social cohesion and political stability, the same dynamics that contributed to the collapse of complex societies in the past. The increasing complexity of modern civilization creates systemic risks that mirror those faced by ancient societies. Global supply chains enable remarkable efficiency and prosperity, but also create vulnerabilities to disruption. Financial systems have become so interconnected that local problems can trigger global crises. Information networks allow unprecedented coordination, but also enable the rapid spread of misinformation and social unrest. Perhaps most concerning is the pace of change in modern society. While ancient civilizations typically had centuries to adapt to changing conditions, modern societies face challenges that evolve within decades or even years. This compression of timescales may make it more difficult for institutions to adapt successfully to new conditions. Yet, the archaeological record also provides reasons for hope. Many societies have successfully navigated major crises and emerged stronger than before. The Northern Maya adapted to the same climate changes that destroyed the classic cities. European societies recovered from the Black Death to enter periods of unprecedented growth and innovation. Chinese civilization has survived multiple dynastic collapses and foreign conquests while maintaining cultural continuity for thousands of years. The key factors that enable successful adaptation appear to be institutional flexibility, social cohesion, economic diversity, and the ability to learn from experience. Societies that maintain multiple options for meeting basic needs, that preserve knowledge and skills across generations, and that can coordinate collective action during crises have the best chances of surviving major challenges. To this day, the patterns revealed by studying collapsed civilizations continue to inform our understanding of contemporary challenges. Climate scientists study how ancient societies adapted to environmental change. Political scientists examine how institutions can maintain legitimacy during crises. Economists analyze how complex systems can become more resilient rather than more fragile as they grow. The civilizations we have explored, from the Bronze Age palace economies to the cliff dwellers of Mesa Verde, remind us that collapse is not inevitable, but neither is survival. The choices we make about social organization, environmental management, and institutional design will determine whether our own civilization follows the path of adaptation and renewal or joins the long list of societies that achieved greatness only to see it slip away into the realm of legend and archaeological mystery. The shadows cast by Angkor's empty temples, the silence that fills Maya plazas where thousands once gathered, and the wind that whistles through abandoned cliff dwellings all carry the same message: that human achievement, no matter how impressive, is always more fragile than it appears, and that the price of survival is eternal vigilance against the forces that have brought down every great civilization that came before us. 7. The future of the past. The sobering lessons written in collapsed cities and abandoned monuments might suggest that the great age of discovery is behind us, that we have learned all we can from the ruins of vanished civilizations and must now focus on applying those lessons to our own precarious future. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. In laboratories across the world, revolutionary technologies are unlocking secrets that have remained hidden for millennia. In the depths of oceans and beneath jungle canopies, new civilizations are being discovered with stunning regularity. And in the pixels of satellite images and the data streams of artificial intelligence, patterns are emerging that promise to rewrite our understanding of human history itself. We are living through what archaeologists call a golden age of discovery, a period when technological advances are revealing more about our past in a single decade than previous generations learned in entire centuries. The same digital revolution that connects our modern world is also connecting us to our ancient one, bridging the gap between present and past with unprecedented clarity and detail. As we stand on the threshold of even greater technological breakthroughs, the future of archaeology has never looked more promising or more capable of surprising us with revelations about what our ancestors achieved in their remote and seemingly alien worlds. Revolutionary discoveries of 2024. The year 2024 may be remembered as a watershed moment in archaeological discovery, when a convergence of new technologies and traditional fieldwork produced a cascade of revelations that challenged fundamental assumptions about ancient civilizations. From the Amazon rainforest to the depths of the Mediterranean, from the highlands of Ethiopia to the jungles of Cambodia, archaeologists announced discoveries that seemed to emerge from the pages of adventure novels rather than academic journals. In the dense forests of Campeche, Mexico, a discovery that perfectly exemplifies our technological age unfolded not in the field but on a computer screen. Luke Auld-Thomas, a PhD student at Tulane University, was analyzing publicly available LiDAR data when he noticed unusual patterns in the jungle canopy. What he had found was Valeriana, a massive Maya city that may have housed between 30,000 and 50,000 people at its peak, larger than many modern Central American capitals. The discovery of Valeriana represents more than just another lost city. It embodies a fundamental shift in how archaeological discovery happens in the 21st century. Using LiDAR data collected for environmental monitoring, Auld-Thomas was able to identify over 6,600 structures across 122 square kilometers without ever setting foot in the jungle. The city features all the hallmarks of major Maya centers: pyramids, palaces, residential complexes, and sophisticated water management systems. Yet it had remained completely unknown to archaeology until a graduate student spotted its signature in laser data collected from aircraft flying 3,000 feet overhead. Equally remarkable was the discovery announced in October 2024 beneath the treasury at Petra, the rose-red wonder of Jordan that has captured imaginations for over 2 centuries. American archaeologists working with ground-penetrating radar detected what appeared to be a complete burial chamber directly underneath the famous facade featured in countless films and documentaries. When they excavated this previously unknown space, they found 12 complete human skeletons along with pottery, jewelry, and other grave goods that provide unprecedented insights into Nabatean burial practices. What makes this discovery particularly significant is not just its location beneath one of the world's most famous monuments, but what it reveals about how much we still don't know about even well-studied archaeological sites. Petra has been intensively investigated for over a century, mapped and surveyed by countless expeditions. Yet a major tomb containing a dozen burials remained completely hidden until modern geophysical techniques revealed its existence. In the highlands of Ethiopia, the year brought equally dramatic revelations about the Aksumite Empire, Africa's forgotten Christian kingdom. At the Beta Samedi site, archaeologists announced the discovery of what appears to be one of the earliest Christian basilicas in sub-Saharan Africa, complete with elaborate stone carvings and evidence of sophisticated architectural planning. Perhaps more intriguingly, they also uncovered evidence of local glass production using techniques previously thought to be beyond the capabilities of ancient African societies. Dr. Michael Harrower's team at Johns Hopkins University revealed that the Axumites weren't merely traders who imported luxury goods from distant lands. They were sophisticated manufacturers who developed their own distinctive glass-making traditions. Chemical analysis of glass beads and vessels from Beta Samity shows that Axumite craftsmen were creating glass using local materials and indigenous techniques, producing objects that were traded throughout the Red Sea region and beyond. Across the Pacific, 2024 brought a discovery that added new mystery to one of archaeology's most enigmatic sites. On Easter Island, drought conditions that lowered water levels in the crater lake of Reino Raraku exposed a previously unknown Moai statue with unique characteristics that set it apart from the nearly 1,000 other statues on the island. Unlike most Moai, which were carved as heads and torsos, this newly revealed statue features intricate body carvings that had been hidden beneath sediment for centuries. The discovery suggests that many of Easter Island's famous statues may have artistic details that remain hidden beneath accumulated soil and sediment. Ground-penetrating radar surveys are now revealing that numerous Moai have full bodies extending deep underground, with some potentially featuring elaborate carvings that haven't been seen for hundreds of years. Perhaps most dramatically, the Amazon rainforest yielded secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about pre-Columbian South America. In Ecuador, LiDAR surveys revealed a network of over 6,000 interconnected earthen platforms and settlements dating back 2,500 years. This Garden City civilization, as researchers are calling it, appears to have supported dense populations through sophisticated agricultural techniques that transformed the natural landscape into a managed ecosystem. The scale of this discovery is staggering. The network of settlements covers an area larger than many modern countries and appears to have been continuously occupied for over 1,000 years. The earthen platforms show evidence of complex urban planning, with residential areas, ceremonial centers, and agricultural zones integrated into sustainable land use patterns that supported populations far larger than previously thought possible in tropical rainforest environments. Technology reshaping archaeology. These remarkable discoveries of 2024 were made possible by a technological revolution that is fundamentally changing how archaeologists explore the past. LiDAR, light detection and ranging technology, has emerged as perhaps the most transformative tool in modern archaeology, capable of penetrating jungle canopies and revealing archaeological sites with unprecedented clarity and detail. The technology works by firing millions of laser pulses from aircraft or satellites, measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return after bouncing off the ground surface. Computer algorithms can then filter out vegetation to create detailed maps of the bare earth, revealing subtle variations in topography that indicate buried structures, ancient roads, agricultural terraces, and defensive works. Dr. Arlen Chase, who has pioneered the use of LiDAR in Maya archaeology, describes the technology as providing X-ray vision for archaeologists. In a single flight over Caracol, Belize, LiDAR revealed more structures than archaeologists had discovered in 25 years of traditional survey work. The technology has now been used to map millions of acres across Mesoamerica, revealing that Maya civilization was far more extensive and sophisticated than previously imagined. The 2018 LiDAR survey of the Maya Biosphere Reserve in Guatemala alone identified over 60,000 previously unknown structures, suggesting that the region may have supported populations of 10 to 15 million people during the Classic period, numbers that would make the ancient Maya lowlands as densely populated as modern Holland. Artificial intelligence is adding another dimension to archaeological discovery. Machine learning algorithms can now analyze satellite imagery to identify potential archaeological sites with accuracy rates approaching 80%. Dr. Sarah Parcak, often called the space archaeologist, has used AI analysis of satellite data to identify thousands of potential sites across Egypt, Peru, and other archaeological hotspots. The algorithms work by training on known archaeological sites to recognize the subtle patterns that indicate human activity, variations in soil color, geometric shapes that suggest walls or foundations, and landscape modifications that point to ancient settlement. What once required years of ground survey can now be accomplished in weeks of computer analysis, allowing archaeologists to focus their limited field time on the most promising sites. Perhaps most remarkably, AI is beginning to crack codes that have puzzled scholars for decades. In 2024, researchers announced a breakthrough in reading the carbonized scrolls found at Herculaneum, buried by Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. The Vesuvius Challenge used machine learning to detect ink patterns in CT scans of scrolls too fragile to unroll, successfully reading several passages of previously unknown ancient texts. The same techniques are now being applied to other undeciphered scripts. Researchers are using AI to analyze patterns in Linear A, the mysterious Minoan script, and even attempting to decode the Rongorongo writing system of Easter Island. While definitive breakthroughs remain elusive, the ability to process vast amounts of data and identify subtle patterns gives AI tools unprecedented power to detect linguistic structures that human analysts might miss. DNA analysis is revealing migration patterns, population dynamics, and cultural connections that were invisible to traditional archaeology. Ancient DNA extracted from human remains, animals, and even plants is rewriting our understanding of how ancient peoples moved across landscapes, adapted to new environments, and maintained connections across vast distances. The 2024 study of ancient Turkey DNA from Mesa Verde exemplifies this revolution. By analyzing genetic material from turkey bones found at ancestral Puebloan sites, researchers were able to trace the migration routes of cliff dweller communities after they abandoned Mesa Verde. The turkeys served as inadvertent genetic markers, carried by migrating families to new settlements in the Rio Grande Valley, where their descendants still live today. Similar techniques are revealing the true scope of ancient trade networks. DNA analysis of cacao beans from Maya sites shows that chocolate was being traded across Mesoamerica far earlier than previously known. Isotope analysis of obsidian tools reveals procurement patterns that illuminate prehistoric economic systems. Even analysis of tartar on ancient teeth is providing insights into diet, health, and cultural practices of long-vanished peoples. The underwater frontier. Perhaps nowhere is the potential for discovery greater than beneath the world's oceans and lakes, where rising and falling sea levels have hidden and revealed countless archaeological sites over the millennia. Underwater archaeology has emerged from a specialized niche to become one of the most dynamic fields in archaeological research, driven by advances in diving technology, underwater robotics, and marine survey techniques. The Mediterranean Sea alone is estimated to contain hundreds of thousands of shipwrecks spanning over 3,000 years of maritime history. Recent discoveries include Bronze Age vessels with cargoes that illuminate ancient trade networks, Roman ships carrying exotic animals for gladiatorial games, and Byzantine merchants laden with silk and spices from the Far East. Dr. Frank Gaudio's ongoing excavations at Thonis Heraklion, the lost Egyptian port city discovered in Abu Qir Bay, continue to yield remarkable finds. The city, which sank into the Mediterranean due to earthquakes and subsidence, provides a unique snapshot of Ptolemaic Egypt preserved beneath protective layers of sand and mud. Recent discoveries include colossal statues of pharaohs and gods, elaborate ceremonial barges, and evidence of international trade connections that extended from Greece to India. Underwater archaeologists are also exploring submerged landscapes that were dry land during the last ice age. The Doggerland project in the North Sea is using fishing industry data and offshore development surveys to map a vast submerged landscape that connected Britain to continental Europe until around 6,500 BCE. This Atlantis of the North Sea may have supported substantial hunter-gatherer populations and could contain unprecedented evidence of Mesolithic life in Northern Europe. Advanced underwater robotics are making previously inaccessible sites available for exploration. Autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, can now survey vast areas of seafloor, identifying shipwrecks and archaeological features that would take human divers decades to locate. The 2022 discovery of Ernest Shackleton's ship Endurance in Antarctic waters demonstrates the remarkable preservation possible in deep, cold water environments, raising tantalizing possibilities for what other perfectly preserved archaeological sites might await discovery in the world's deep oceans. What mysteries still await? Despite these technological advances and remarkable recent discoveries, vast mysteries remain. Many of the world's most intriguing archaeological questions are still unanswered, and new discoveries continue to raise as many questions as they resolve. The undeciphered scripts represent some of archaeology's most tantalizing puzzles. Linear A, the script of the Minoan civilization, remains completely mysterious despite over a century of effort by the world's best linguists. The Indus Valley script, with its 400-plus symbols, continues to guard the secrets of one of the world's earliest urban civilizations. The Rongorongo script of Easter Island may preserve Polynesian oral traditions in written form, but its meaning remains locked away. Advances in AI and machine learning offer new hope for cracking these ancient codes. Researchers are developing algorithms that can detect patterns in symbol usage, identify potential grammatical structures, and even attempt to match unknown scripts with known languages. While definitive breakthroughs remain elusive, the computational power now available to researchers far exceeds anything previous generations of scholars could access. Vast areas of the world remain archaeologically unexplored or underexplored. The Amazon rainforest, despite recent LiDAR revelations, still conceals an estimated 90% of its archaeological sites beneath dense vegetation. Central Asia, the crossroads between East and West for thousands of years, remains largely unmapped archaeologically. The ocean floors contain not only countless shipwrecks but also submerged coastlines and river valleys that could preserve evidence of human occupation dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Perhaps most intriguingly, emerging technologies are revealing that many explored sites still hold major secrets. Ground-penetrating radar surveys at well-known sites like Stonehenge, the Pyramids of Giza, and Angkor Wat continue to reveal previously unknown chambers, tunnels, and structures. The recent discovery of voids within the Great Pyramid using cosmic ray muon tomography suggests that even the most intensively studied monuments may still contain hidden chambers waiting to be explored. Climate change is creating both opportunities and urgencies for archaeological discovery. Melting ice in mountain regions is exposing artifacts and sites that have been frozen for thousands of years, often in remarkable states of preservation. The 1991 discovery of Ötzi the Iceman in the Italian Alps demonstrated the extraordinary preservation possible in glacial environments. As glaciers continue to retreat, archaeologists are finding everything from prehistoric hunting equipment to medieval trading routes preserved in ice. However, the same climate change that reveals some sites is destroying others. Rising sea levels threaten coastal archaeological sites around the world, while increased storms and flooding are accelerating erosion at vulnerable locations. The race to document and preserve these sites before they are lost forever adds urgency to archaeological research. The next frontier, space archaeology. The newest frontier in archaeological research literally reaches for the stars. Space archaeology, the use of satellite imagery and other remote sensing technologies to identify and study archaeological sites, is revealing the scope of human impact on Earth's landscape with unprecedented clarity. Satellites can now detect archaeological features invisible to ground-based observers. Thermal imaging reveals buried walls and structures through subtle differences in heat retention. Multispectral imaging can identify crop marks and soil variations that indicate subsurface archaeology. Even vegetation analysis can reveal ancient settlement patterns, as plants often grow differently over buried structures. The European Space Agency's Sentinel satellites, originally designed for environmental monitoring, are providing archaeologists with a continuous stream of high-resolution imagery that documents changes to archaeological sites in real time. This capability is proving crucial for monitoring threats to cultural heritage, from development pressure to conflict damage to natural erosion. Looking toward the future, emerging technologies promise even more revolutionary capabilities. Quantum sensors may eventually allow archaeologists to peer deep underground without excavation. Advanced AI systems could process vast databases of archaeological information to identify patterns and connections invisible to human researchers. Virtual and augmented reality technologies are already allowing people to experience reconstructed ancient sites with unprecedented realism. The endless quest. As we stand at the threshold of these technological advances, one thing becomes clear: the age of archaeological discovery is far from over. If anything, we are entering a golden age of exploration where the pace of discovery will accelerate rather than slow. The technologies now becoming available to archaeologists are revealing that our ancestors were more numerous, more sophisticated, and more interconnected than we ever imagined. Each new discovery raises fundamental questions about human capability, creativity, and resilience. The recently revealed Amazon Garden Cities suggest that sustainable urban planning is not a modern invention but an ancient achievement that we are only now beginning to understand. The sophisticated water management systems of Angkor and the Khmer Empire offer lessons for contemporary cities facing water scarcity. The navigation techniques that carried Polynesian voyagers across the Pacific demonstrate human capabilities that we are still working to fully comprehend. To this day, every archaeological discovery adds new chapters to the ongoing human story while reminding us how much we still don't know. The ruins that emerge from jungle canopy in LiDAR surveys, the artifacts that DNA analysis connects across continents, and the texts that AI algorithms slowly decode all point toward the same conclusion. The past is not a closed book, but an endless library of human achievement, innovation, and mystery. The future of the past has never been brighter. As technology continues to advance and new discoveries continue to emerge, we can be certain that the civilizations we have explored in these pages represent only a fraction of the remarkable societies that once flourished on our planet. Somewhere beneath desert sands, jungle canopy, and ocean waves, the next great archaeological discovery is waiting to rewrite our understanding of what our ancestors achieved in their distant and extraordinary worlds. The mysteries that have captivated us, from the sophisticated urbanists of the Indus Valley to the master navigators of Easter Island, from the megalith builders of prehistoric Europe to the cliff dwellers of Mesa Verde, represent just the beginning of our journey into the human past. Each discovery opens new doors while revealing how much more remains to be found, ensuring that the quest to understand our vanished civilizations will continue to challenge, inspire, and amaze future generations of explorers and dreamers. In the end, the true treasure of these lost civilizations is not gold or precious stones, but knowledge of human potential, human resilience, and the endless human capacity to create something beautiful and meaningful in an uncertain world. That treasure continues to yield its riches with each passing day, reminding us that the greatest discoveries may still lie ahead, waiting in the shadows between the known and unknown, between legend and reality, between past and future.